Good evening, everyone. The hour of 6:30 p.m. having arrived, I will call to order the regular meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment for the City of Keene. This meeting is being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel and the city website. The video is also posted on the city website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Anyone wishing to view a copy of the agenda and supporting materials will find it on the city website. To receive electronic copies of future agenda packets, please go to the homepage and subscribe to the city meetings email list. The public and other board members will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, please make all remarks through the chair. Anyone who wishes to address the board is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room, identify yourself by name, and address prior to speaking. As a reminder, the minute taker is participating remotely this evening. Board members, please make sure to turn on your microphone when speaking. If the minute taker is unable to hear, they will ask you to speak louder or turn on your microphone. I have one brief announcement tonight. We are one board member short because a member needed to resign for personal reasons. So that means that each of the hearings tonight will only have 4 members. Each applicant has a right to 5-member board, so if you are inclined to not go forward with a 5-member board, let us know before we start getting into the details of your case. And I don't think I'll make that announcement again, so we'll just play that by ear. But if anybody wants to, when their application comes up, bypass it until next month. We may or may not have a 5-member board next month, so that is something to consider. So with that said, my name is Joe Hoppick. I'm the board chair, and to my left,
Jane Taylor.
Edward Guyot.
Richard Clough.
all right. Now, the minutes of the last meeting we'll take up next. That was from May 6th. And I know, Jane, you had I had an email somewhere, I just lost it. Here it is. You had some changes that I think were circulated?
Yeah, I had actually two corrections, I guess you could call it 3, but for the board members and the minute taker, it's in line 61. At the end of it, it says increasing the impervious surface and does not know. I think the is kind of snuck in there as an extra word and should be deleted.
Strike the is in line 61. Okay, that's one.
Lines 1424 and 1428. Which is in your packet on page 37 of 137. Both of them say met with a vote of 3-0. Ms. Taylor was opposed. There were 4 of us here, so it should be 3-1 with Ms. Taylor opposed. So if that correction could be made.
Okay. I don't see any issue. I think that is correct. Anybody else have any comments about the minutes? None? No? Okay, good. Mindful of Attorney Taylor's corrections to lines 61, 1424, and 1428, all those in favor of approving the minutes? Oh, I made it. Do you want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept minutes from Attorney Taylor's letter.
As amended, okay. Attorney Taylor seconds that. All those in favor? 4-0. All right. First, pardon me 1 second. We'll take up the first item tonight, which will be 2024-12. Petitioner requests a variance to permit a 3-foot side setback where 10 feet is required per Article 3.5.2 of the zoning regulations. Do we have somebody to present for that? Oh, Mr. Hagan, let's have your introduction first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 45 Dover Street is located in medium density. This lot currently has 0.21 acres, about 8,712 square feet. Is currently a non-conforming two-family. The building total square footage is 5,938 square feet. Living space is 3,416 square feet. This application is for a variance for the setback of a proposed building and potentially a dwelling unit above that proposed building using the cottage court ordinance, the newly adopted cottage court ordinance. So when keeping that in mind, there were no ZBA decisions on files for this.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hagan? Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, I just want to confirm, so the lot size is non-conforming, the building is not conforming, or both?
So currently, the two-family in the medium density zone requires 8,000 square feet for the first and 5,000 square feet for every additional unit under current zoning requirements. So the lot size is 8,712 square feet, so it's short of the required for the second unit.
Yes.
You said it was under the new cottage court ordinance. The application says it's an application for an ADU, so I'm confused.
Sure. I was going to let the applicant explain. We had some conversation about some of the wording that was used on the application, and he can go through and explain his intent of the application, if that works for you.
Why don't we let the applicant speak to the application then? Sir?
First time doing this, so you might have to guide me a little bit if I'm not giving you what you need.
Just give us your name and your address or
Okay.
town where you live, and you go through the criteria for the variance.
Okay, so Tom Burton, 45 Dover Street, Keene, New Hampshire. So I'm going to read what I wrote up for you. The application I submitted is quite extensive with the wording, so I prefer not to read that all to you, but I'm willing if you need me to. So in summary, looking at public interest, granting this variance would enhance the local housing supply, addressing the community housing shortage without requiring new infrastructure. The project is designed to match the neighborhood's architectural style, ensuring it complements the area's aesthetics and maintains visual harmony. Additionally, it makes efficient use of the property without significant encroachment, ensuring no adverse effects to light, air, or privacy for neighboring properties. The project is expected to increase property values in the neighborhood, contributing to economic vitality. Adding to that, I did submit a letter that was from my neighbor who would actually be encroached the most by this side variance. And there's a letter that she supports the building of this property. Spirit of the ordinance. The proposed development aligns with the goals of the zoning ordinance by promoting orderly, beneficial development while preserving the character of the neighborhood. The construction of the garage with an apartment supports local residential growth objectives and demonstrates a commitment to sustainable land use. Reducing the side setback to 3 feet, and to explain that, so 3 feet from the roof overhang. So the building itself would be 5 feet away from the property line. Right? So this represents, this 3 feet represents the minimum modification needed to achieve the desired development. The impact on the surrounding property values. The new structure is designed to complement the neighborhood style using high-quality materials and design standards, ensuring it is an asset to the area. The addition increases the property's functionality, making it more attractive to potential buyers and contributing to the balanced local housing market. The project includes measures to prevent adverse effects on neighboring properties and will likely lead to high property tax contributions, benefiting local services and infrastructure. So I am working specifically with the neighbor that I would be closest to and have the most effect on. So for instance, she has already given her opinion on the color of the house because she wants it a lighter color to ensure that light does enter her windows, and so that's something I'm going to do. Also, to be clear, the encroachment on her property, it would be the northern side of her house. She doesn't get direct sunlight through there anyway. Unnecessary hardship. Strict application of the 10-foot side setback significantly limits the potential to address the urgent community need for additional housing. The property's unique location and configuration make it especially suitable for this type of development. Reducing the setback to 3 feet is essential for the reasonable use of the property, allowing the construction of the planned garage and apartment, which aligns with community goals and zoning objectives. And then finally, the substantial justice. Approving this variance will result in substantial justice by allowing me to make necessary improvements to my property without causing harm to the public or my neighbors. It recognizes the unique circumstances of my lot and provides a fair solution that balances my needs with community standards.
Can you elaborate on the unique circumstances of your lot, please?
So it's not unique in the sense of, I've looked at the property map from the top, and it's not unique in that sense, right? I say it's unique in the sense that it has a situation where the building that's already there that was built in 1870, right, is not allowing me to, I guess, help myself and the community. So I guess it's unique in that sense that it's not able to work within the current zoning regulations to try to address those two situations.
Anybody have any questions for the applicant? Attorney Taylor?
I may have some additional questions, but my initial one is from looking at the property and what you've submitted. With that overhang being 3 feet from the property line, what's going to happen when the snow slides off the roof? Is that going to dump on on the abutting property?
It's a good question. So I've addressed the water. The plan is to put gutters up right now. The property next to me, her name is Sarah, that owns that property. She has real water problems. My property is higher elevation than hers. So, and then the other properties behind me and to the north are higher than me. So I get all their water, and then she gets all mine in her basement, right? So I'm gonna gutter. I'll gutter this building so that it'll actually be a net benefit for her. In other words, her basement hopefully will not flood as much or at all. Regarding snow, that's a good question. I'm not sure how to answer that. I haven't thought about that. If the snow was to fall on her property, it would be in the yard. It wouldn't be on a building. It's the northern side. It's not there's no walkway there. There's no any kind of people aren't back there unless they're mowing the yard. I'm not sure if there's some kind of technology that I can put on the roof to help. I think break up the snow when it does fall. But that's something that I would, definitely want to do. I don't want to cause any harm or have any problems like that.
Anything else?
I'm thinking.
Your neighbor's property is very close to the same boundary line that you're seeking the setback from, and I'm looking at your diagram.
Yes, sir.
How far is that closest point on her home to her setback, do you know?
I'd say so. So looking at the map, the portion of her property that sticks out and is closest to the property line on the northern part there is, probably about a foot.
To her setback line?
Correct.
So that would put it about 14 feet from your setback, from your overhang, basically, right?
No, that would, so if I'm allowed the 3 feet, that would put it 4 feet from the setback.
Yeah, but her
line.
setback is 10, is it not?
It is not.
What's her setback then?
Her setback?
Yeah.
Her setback is probably about a foot off of her property line.
I'm glad I asked the question. That's not how I was looking at that. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, could you explain a little more about how the situation is unique? Because if I wrote this down correctly, and I may not have, not allowing to help myself to work within the current zoning regulations. So I was looking at medium density, tended to provide for medium intensity and associated uses, which doesn't tell us much.
Sure.
Except that a two-family on this lot that's already substandard seems to me to be at least medium density. So I'm a little, I guess I'm not understanding what you said.
You're not understanding the uniqueness answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, I believe the medium density is, it's the end of the medium density, right? You go one street over and you're in high density, right, as you get closer to the city. I'm very close to the downtown. I think one thing that's making this situation kind of unique is if you look at my neighbor's setback, it's not the 10 feet, right? It's 1 foot. I guess the uniqueness that I see is it's kind of a stretch, I guess, but the uniqueness I see is that, you know, right now, the way the structure is built, if my structure was built closer to my other property line, like my neighbor's, right, my neighbor's property line, I would have the space to build this probably without a variance, right? But it's not. Mine's offset. It's more centered on the property, right? Where my neighbor, she probably has the space to build, because she has more space on her southern side, because her building is closer to her property line on the northern side, without the setback.
So you're, just so I'm clear, your argument is that the placement of your structure on your lot makes the property unique?
Correct.
Okay. And that can be compared to the property on your north side as well as the property on your south side,
Correct.
judging from this plan that I'm looking at. Can you tell me more about the existing residence, the 1,920 square foot structure there? How many bedrooms and how many people can live in that home?
Sure, so we have, so it's 2 units.
Yep.
My son and I live in the bottom unit, and we have tenants in the upper unit. And there's 4 bedrooms upstairs, 4 bedrooms downstairs. So, you know, I'd say 4 people could live in each.
Upstairs and downstairs?
4 upstairs, 4 downstairs.
Okay.
And so I assume you may be getting to parking as well, because there are parking regulations that,
You would be assuming correctly, but I'm not there yet.
okay.
I'm just trying to understand the density of the lot.
So there's 4 bedrooms in each unit, so a total of 8 bedrooms in 2
Okay.
units.
And in the accessory dwelling unit there, how many people do you propose will live in there, the ADU?
So I'm looking at creating a small 2-bedroom of maybe 900 square feet.
For one
Apartment.
person or two?
2 bedrooms, so to say 2 people.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you that, so that you have, it's about 10 people. Where are all those cars going to go?
So if I recall, so I can put, once if this lot goes, or if this building goes up, it would encroach a bit into the driveway. There will still be room for 4 vehicles there, and a 5th vehicle in the garage.
And that's the garage underneath the unit on the second floor?
Correct.
Okay. But you could be short 5 spots. Do you know what's available on the road?
I believe, can I ask for ordinance, for what the ordinance is on this? Because I believe the ordinance, I'm within the ordinance on this one.
I don't know,
Yeah.
I'm thinking 10 people, 1 car per 2 on average, but I don't know. I don't remember what the ordinance says, right?
Currently, the ordinance would require 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. There are some additional exceptions if a CUP is sought for the cottage court of one per unit.
Okay. Anything else? Oh, Attorney Taylor.
Yeah, which brings up the question I had for Mr. Hagan earlier, because the application says ADU, but I understand you're coming in under the new cottage court ordinance, so
Yes, ma'am.
could you clarify that for me?
Sure, sure. So in working with, the planning department and they helped me with the process, we talked about they helped me, show me the ordinances, what I was complying with, what I wasn't, and ultimately I decided it was going to be better for me to work under the cottage court. And that's why I waited to come forward to make sure that on the 16th that went through, which it did. I don't know if that answers your question. Is that?
Well, how does that impact your proposal?
Well, I believe if cottage court never passed, I wouldn't have come forward because I would have had multiple variances I would have had to ask for versus just one. And I wouldn't have brought it forward because I believe that would be too risky, right, to spend the money and time to try to do that. Under cottage court, I'm coming, in front of you to ask for just one variance.
Could I ask Mr. Hagan?
Yes.
Could you clarify how a cottage court differs, because this is brand new and I read it once, but it didn't absorb it all.
Sure, it's a pretty lengthy chapter, but I can give you some brief, a brief overview. It's kind of the cart before the horse. So in this case, they're asking for a variance for the building setback. He would have to go in front of the planning board for conditional use permit to move forward. Again, meeting all the regulations that go with that. I would hate to kind of bore you reading page by page of that chapter, but know that if a variance was issued for it, you could condition it upon getting a conditional use permit, just like if the planning board if he was to go to get a conditional use permit prior to getting a variance, they could condition it upon a variance, that it wouldn't be valid unless he got the variance. So kind of either or scenario, we thought this was a cleaner path.
Okay. Any questions from the members? Additional questions? Attorney Taylor.
I have a technical question. Is it not working that we can't see the plans on the screens?
We are having technical difficulties with the
okay.
screens at the moment. That's why this one was turned around, but we can't get any of the applications up or the screen. I would have gotten you the aerials, and we were working on it.
All right, thank
We're
you.
The only
kinda-
plan in the record is this one here, right?
That is
Three
correct.
lots?
Yes.
Okay.
If it's helpful, I can bring my laptop around for you to look at an aerial. I don't know if you'd like to see it.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you have anything further you want to add before I go to the next phase?
No, I think I've said everything I need to say unless you have more questions for me.
Okay, I don't have any more. You've been helpful for the ones asked thus far. Last call for any questions from the members. Seeing none. If there are any comments from the public who support this application, we can hear from you now. Just state your name and where you live.
Ryan Clancy, 51 Dover Street. I am in favor of this application. I'm the neighbor to the north of Mr. Burton. And so all the properties on Dover Street are within that 10-foot setback. That property to the south of Mr. Burton's property is not the only one that is a foot away from the property line. Almost every house on that street falls into that. And as Mr. Burton said, we are one street away from high density. And along with that, there are two properties across from Mr. Burton that are, though they're considered 2 units, they are rented by the room, and that's at least a 12-bedroom house. The 2 units are 10 to 12 bedrooms. So there's many people that live in those. And then across from my property, there are 2 Keene housing properties that are on the property line or as well as a foot away from a property line. And those are more than 2 units as well. So it would conform to the neighborhood. As someone on the planning board, I'm excited about this possible cottage court being the first one to come to us. And I just hope when you're looking at granting this variance or not granting this variance, you're looking at the 3-foot setback and not things that the planning board would look at, like parking and the residential use above the building that Mr. Burton is looking to build.
Could I ask you how long you've been in the neighborhood?
I've been there for 3.5 years now.
Would you be able to say if these properties, these other properties you're talking about in the immediate area, would you be able to say if the location of the primary residence on the property is the reason for the closeness of the property lines, or was it just, in other words, their placement, or was some other reason that they're so close?
It's just how the lots were broken up, I'm assuming. They're all pretty much just under a quarter of an acre, or I think that's 0.18 or 0.19 acres for each, or majority of the properties on that street. And all the houses are pretty much the same with that bump out that you were looking at.
Yep.
Majority of the houses have that bump out.
And the majority of them were there more than 50 years?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's helpful, thank you. Attorney Taylor,
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Clancy.
he wants to sit down.
Did you say you're a member of the planning board?
Correct.
You don't believe that this creates a conflict for you to come up and testify in favor of something that's going to be coming before the planning board?
Well, on planning board, I will be stepping down from this
Okay.
application, but as a neighbor and an abutter to this property, I am in my full right to come and speak to it.
Oh, absolutely. I just was curious about your,
Oh, no,
I didn't realize you were on the
I'll
planning
be stepping
board.
away from this
Okay,
vote
thank
if
you.
it does come to the board.
Is there anybody else in the public who wishes to speak in favor of this application? Seeing none, is there anybody in the public who wishes to speak opposed to this application? I don't see anybody wishing to speak opposed. I will note for the record, and I don't think I need to read it unless somebody disagrees, but the applicant did mention a letter from Sarah Duzinski, D-U-Z-I-N-S-K-I, the immediate southerly abutter? Correct? Yeah, yes, there is a letter in the file from her in support of this application, so it's in the record, and I'll let the record speak. But if there's no other comments from the public, we'll close the meeting and move on to deliberations. Attorney Taylor.
Yeah, I'm looking at the first criteria, the variance is not contrary to the public interest. And I have a bit of a quandary here because it appears that there's something of a conflict between the medium density and the cottage court ordinance, and I'm not really quite sure which we should be following. I have some concerns that if we were to follow exclusively the medium density provision, I would think that it might be contrary to public interest, if only because if you've got basically 4 feet between structures, if this were built, I can see it being a hazard. Whether fire or some other catastrophic event. I'm also worried about the snow sliding off the roof. As opposed to the cottage court ordinance, which I'm not terribly familiar with, but it appears that that might be encouraging houses to be 4 feet from one another. So I tend to come down on the side of it actually being contrary to public interest because of it being, creating something that is cheek to jowl, as they would say, to the abutting house, even if the abutter is in favor of it.
Okay. I share the concern about the tightness, and I really did believe that from looking at the plan, that it was more room than that, so it does give me a degree of concern as well. But on the other side of that coin, if you will, the applicant is correct that he is, however incremental this may be, he is addressing the housing issue in this city to a degree. I mean, his lot is only so big, he can't do that much about it, but he's adding living space. And he is increasing the tax base, which are two factors that strike in favor of the public interest. The comment from the neighbor indicates to me that there's not going to be any serious alteration in the character of the neighborhood, and aside from the closeness of the two structures, I don't see any danger to health or welfare or safety, again, aside from the closeness of it. The other piece to this that bothers me somewhat is the density. There's a lot of people in the main structure, 8 people there, 2 more people in the ADU. There could be up to 10 people on a relatively small lot. And I'm not sure if that is, if it would be a gain to the public to prevent that in terms of the third criterion. I'm not sure if that's, I haven't resolved that yet. So those are the concerns I have. But on the whole, I would say that it meets the public interest test. I'm not sure if it's going to meet the other ones, though. In terms of the spirit of the ordinance, as I said, I don't think it's going to, from the testimony of the neighbor, it seems to me that this request is consistent with the character of the neighborhood and will not alter it in any fashion. And that's how I would see that criterion resolved. I'm not sure if the gain to the public is that significant. If this were denied anyway, the gain to the public would be less density. And the loss of the individual would be significant. He wouldn't be able to develop his property as he wishes. And to me, that's a close call. I don't see any evidence here that this variance, if approved, would diminish property values, because as has been indicated already, it will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. I would agree, yes.
Yeah, I would just say that we have not really heard any testimony on the value, and I think that's probably a wash because, again, of the increased density. I mean, you may have to pay more taxes, but I'm not sure that it would be a favorable impact on resale value if I knew that I was 4 feet away from the wall of my neighbor.
Well, you'd certainly be able to see that upon driving in the driveway, I think.
Yeah, but, so that's why I see it as a wash.
The question there is going to become whether it negatively impacts the surrounding properties, and I don't see any information about that. And two neighbors support this. We don't have anybody opposing it, not in writing and not verbally. So that allows me to draw an inference that nobody in the neighborhood thinks their property values are going to be affected by this. So I would lean on the side of it not being detrimental to property values. I would agree with the applicant that just shifting gears into the fifth criterion, that the placement of the structure, given the configuration of the lot, can be a special condition of the property. And that placement, in relation to the placement of other houses in the immediate area, namely the neighbor to the north and south. And you look at the plan they gave us, it's quite clear the neighbor to the north is, his home is pushed farther up against the northern boundary of his lot, whereas the same is true with the southern neighbor, who wrote a letter in favor, and her house is pressed right up against the line. Now, we don't have any information as to where these boundary lines were. 50 years ago, we didn't have, 55 years ago or 60 years ago, we didn't have zoning. So these lots were created before we had these regulations to deal with. These are non-conforming lots. Yes?
Yeah, I have some concerns with that position, as I say often. I respectfully disagree. In part because, well, first of all, there's pretty good case law that it's not a hardship if you're by itself, if the zoning restrictions may interfere with the proposed use of the property. There's reasonable use and then there's any use. It might be reasonable if it weren't for the fact that if you drive down Dover Street, as I did before the meeting, the houses are basically the same age primarily. I mean, there are a few additions here and there on the same size lots. And there are, starting with a case titled Crossley that was written by Justice Souter and then followed up by another case, the Harrington case. If all the lots are similar, it doesn't create a unique setting for the property. And the solution is, if you don't think that these dimensional requirements are correct, then you should change the zoning requirements, which has been done in part with the cottage court ordinance, except that it didn't do away with dimensional requirements. So I don't think that the size of the lot constitutes a hardship because all the other lots are similar. And if you look at, we've only got a picture of 3 of the lots, but just sort of eyeballing, obviously I don't have a drawing with the lot lines, but most of the properties on that street are in a similar configuration. They're small lots, they're old houses, they're fairly close to lot lines on one side or the other. So I frankly don't see the hardship.
I certainly would like to have more information because I do believe that the structure placement in relation to the lot line locations and size of the lot do matter. I guess if pressed, I would say at best the evidence is insufficient on hardship in this case. So I'm not sure I would say no hardship, but it reaches the same result. If it's insufficient, the applicant hasn't met his burden, and that's just the same as saying there's no hardship, so.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
one thing I could add to that in my mind that might support the uniqueness of the property is the fact that the southerly neighbor's home is very close to the lot line. It appears roughly about a foot or so, which, in a sense, puts a burden on the applicant's lot as far as the changing the setback, making it even tighter. So he can't control that. That home's been there, just like all the others. But in a sense, that makes a unique burden on his property, as opposed to the northerly lot. The house seems to be somewhat more central on the lot. It's still a little bit to the north end, but his abutting neighbor is very close, which, in my mind, starts to put a burden on his property to make it unique, a unique burden we're looking for.
Thank you for that. Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, I don't think that that creates a unique condition of the subject property. It may be a unique condition if the neighbor wanted to do something, being only a foot from the lot line. But in my view, I don't think that creates a unique situation for this particular property.
Anybody have any comments about any of the factors? Because we've been sort of bouncing around on each one.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I haven't heard any discussion on the criteria number 3 that we can put on the record.
Oh, sure. I thought I mentioned that before, but I'll do it again.
Thank you.
Third criterion is substantial justice. As our Supreme Court has said often, the only guiding rule in this factor is that any loss to the individual that is not outweighed by a gain to the general public is an injustice. And as I said before, I thought that the issue of the density of this property may be, avoiding that is, may be a gain to the public. And the question is, does the loss of the individual, is it outweighed by that, preventing density like that? And that's where I just wasn't sure I had an answer at that moment or this moment, quite frankly. But I think it's a rather close one. I do think I do think the public interest strand or criterion is satisfied because of the housing issue and the property tax base benefit. I do think it's not contrary to the public interest or to the ordinance because it will not alter the essential characteristics of the neighborhood. There may be a safety issue here because of the closeness of the two properties, the property in question and the one to the south of it, because of the closeness to the properties. So there's a question on criterion number 2. Number 3, I would give the applicant the benefit of the doubt and say the gain to the public is not sufficient to outweigh his loss. So he would meet that standard. I think he meets the 4th standard, that there would be no, if the variance are granted, the values of the surrounding properties would not be diminished. And I'd be in favor of finding the unique property for the reasons I explained before. So I'm hung up on the safety piece of this. I don't know where else everybody else stands, but those are my cards, and they're on the table. Attorney Taylor.
Yeah, first of all, I agree with the safety concerns, and that's probably a 2-pronged factor. One is the closeness of the property, and the second would be the increased density. I mean, it's nice to have areas used in new residential property, but there are limits. The other thing is going back to the hardship, and I found my citation from the Harrington case. I'm quoting from it. It says, "The applicant must show the hardship is a result of a specific condition of the property and not the area in general. The property must be burdened by zoning restriction in a manner that is distinct from other similarly situated property. The burden cannot arise as a result of the zoning ordinance's equal burden on all property in the district. The burden must arise from the property and not from the individual's plight of the landowner, or the individual plight of the landowner. So, again, and I think that really applies quite well in this situation because, again, of the similarity of the lots, the age of the structures, the nearness, whether it's this lot or another lot, to setbacks, especially on the side. So, anyway, I found that, so I wanted to mention it.
I'm glad you did, thank you. Are there any further comments from the members? If there isn't, we can go ahead and have a motion made if you'd like. Somebody wants to make one? And this is 2412. Attorney Taylor, sorry.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to add 2 conditions to it. The motion would be to approve ZBA 2024-12, seeking a variance for property located at 45 Dover Street, tax map 569-082-000 in the medium density district, to replace the required 10-foot side setback with a 3-foot side setback per Article 3.5.2 of the zoning regulations. And the conditions that I would propose would be, 1, that it be conditioned on approval and meeting all requirements of a conditional use permit by the planning board. And the second one, if it meets all the requirements, that it be designed so that the snow load is not deposited on the abutting property. And I don't know if snow load is the proper terminology.
So just for clarity, you don't want it sliding off the roof into her lawn or into her property?
I would like to see it, and we've done this with other properties, so that when it slides off the roof, it not only doesn't go onto her property, but it doesn't smack into her house because it's only a foot from the lot line.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Clough, okay, good. I think we've covered the 5 criteria. Does anyone want to have any more discussion about any one or more of those criteria? I think we've covered it. In that case, let's vote. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. All those in favor? Just to make sure all 4 of you guys had your hands up, right? All right, so it's 4-0 in favor. If the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. All those in favor? All those against? Tie, 2-2. Hoppick and Taylor are voting against. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. All those in favor? 4-0. If the variance were granted, the values of the surrounding properties would not be diminished. All those in favor? 3 in favor, opposed? Attorney Taylor opposes. Owing to the special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, denial of the variance would result in an unnecessary hardship because no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property. All those in favor? I'm in favor. I'm the only one. All those opposed? 3 opposed. Now, on the main motion to approve, subject to the 2 conditions, all those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? The motion to approve fails by a vote of 0 to 4. Attorney Taylor.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to deny ZBA 2024-12 request for variance for property at 45 Dover Street, tax map 569-082-000, for a variance to allow construction for with a 3-foot side setback instead of the 10-foot required side setback.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Clough seconds. All those in favor of that motion? Unanimous, 4-0. We'll next go to ZBA 24-13. Petitioner Jim Fippert of Brickstone Land Use Consultants LLC of 185 Winchester Street requests a variance for property located at 0 Wetmore Street, tax map 116-032-001, in the High Density District and owned by the Bergeron Family Revocable Trust of 2021. The petitioner requests a variance to permit a building lot containing 5,544 square feet where 6,000 square feet is required, per Article 3.6.2, minimum lot area of the zoning regulations. Mr. Hayden, do you want to speak to this first?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 0 Wetmore Street is zoned high density, 0.13 acres, 5,544 square feet, as stated. There are currently no buildings on the lot and no ZBA decisions in the file. This was a lot that has been in existence since the inception of that development down there.
And that was 1926, is that right? I know Mr.
I
Fippert put it
could
in.
not quote that, but
The question is, does this case bring you out of retirement for good? I'm surprised to
The
see
answer
you.
is no.
Okay, good answer.
I did this application 3 years ago, and because it expired, he went to apply for a building permit. He didn't realize he lost his variance. He came back to me, and I said I would help him.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and carry on then?
Could,
Oh,
could you just speak up a little bit? I know it's going into the tape, but I'm
Sure.
having,
I'm hoarse from all the pollen in the air.
Oh,
It's,
yeah.
my allergies. I apologize for that.
that's all right.
Jim Fippert, I'm here on behalf of the Bergeron Family Revocable Trust of 2021. The trust owns the property at 0 Wetmore Street, and it's located here on this page. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but it's an existing vacant lot which is non-conforming due to lot size. When I applied for the original variance back in 2021, I gave the background at that time. This whole area of Wetmore Street and Fairbank Street was part of a 172 house lot subdivision that was created by Albert LaCroix. And it was in 1926. So there was no zoning in place at that time that restricted lot sizes. So several of the lots in this area are substandard for lot size based on today's zoning regulations. So this lot was conforming at the time that it was created, became non-conforming as the zoning laws changed over time. And the most recent one that required the 6,000 square feet actually occurred in 1970. So that's when this lot became non-conforming, because this lot is only 5,544 square feet. So we're 456 feet short of being a legal lot size. So I did want you to understand that. There was a time period when the assessing office combined this lot to the north of it, which had the same owner at that time. And that's back when it was being done without landowner's permission necessarily. So when the landowner realized that his lot got merged without his permission, he filed a request with assessing to separate it again, which they did. So each of the lots are existing non-conforming. The lot to the north has an existing house on it. The lots that I've shaded in yellow on this plan are also non-conforming lots that were originally created back in 1926. So granting the variance, I believe, is not contrary to the public interest. This plan, and I apologize it's not in color, my color plotter died, and because I'm retired, I didn't want to invest the thousands of dollars in a new one. So you see it in black and white. This is the vacant lot that we're discussing tonight, located on Wetmore Street. And the lot is large enough to allow a single-family home to be constructed that meets all of the other dimensional requirements that are required in the high-density district. So it meets the side setbacks, the front setback, and the rear setback. And we even calculated lot coverage to show that it doesn't exceed lot coverage. So it conforms in all respects except for the size of the lot. So I think it's in the public interest to allow this lot to be developed for a single-family home. That's what we're requesting, similar to what has been done on other non-conforming lots. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them that also have houses on them in the immediate neighborhood near this property. So I think it clearly is in the public interest. And as you can see, this is not a large home that would be built. At the time, he was looking at a house footprint that was 22 by 18. Since then, he may add a single-car garage, but there's room for that on this easterly side of the lot. So, and he still would comply to the lot coverage requirement and the setback requirements. So I think it's in the public interest to allow this lot to be cleaned up and improved. It'll add to the tax base. It'll provide a home, and I believe this will be an affordable home. So there's a lot of reasons to allow this. The spirit of the ordinance, I believe, is observed because this entire neighborhood has many small lots. And I pointed out 6 that are already built on that are similar or identical in size to this lot. So I think that it's only fair to allow this lot to be developed in a similar manner. The lot today, as a vacant lot, it's being used to store some snowmobiles and equipment, a vehicle. And if that continues and can't be built on, it's probably going to become unsightly and be a detriment to the neighborhood. So cleaning up the lot and developing it for a single-family home, I think will be a big improvement, and it will help the neighborhood and help protect property values. Substantial justice. Again, this is only 456 square feet short of the required 6,000 square feet. It became non-conforming due to changes in the zoning regulation, not due to anything the landowner did. So this was essentially done to him. And I think it does meet the criteria for substantial justice for those reasons. The effect on surrounding property values, I think cleaning up this lot, using it as a single-family home similar to the other lots in the neighborhood, will help to enhance the value of the properties rather than being a vacant lot that can become detrimental. And unnecessary hardship, I believe the special conditions that relate to this property come from the original subdivision, 1926. It was legally conforming at the time they created it. Changes over the years by the city council have resulted in the lot becoming non-conforming. So it meets all of the current dimensional requirements, and even with a single-family home, it can meet the lot coverage requirements and all the building setback requirements. So I believe that the unique feature of the changes in zoning is what caused this. The proposed use is reasonable because it's identical to the other uses surrounding it in the neighborhood. They're all single-family homes. And it can be done, it's on city water and city sewer, that's existing at the property, and it can meet all the other dimensional requirements. And finally, under 5B, special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area. It really is, it's really not separate from the other properties in the area. And if I argued that, Jane would call me on it. I know that. So it's similar to the other lots, but the good thing is, the other lots that have a similar nonconformity are all developed, and it's been done in a good manner. Property values there over the last couple of years have been coming up, and I think this is another positive step that'll help that trend to continue. It was approved back in 2021, and I hope you'll approve it again.
Can I ask you about that, Jim?
Sure.
In 2021, did we rely on unnecessary hardship criterion 5B for that?
I'm not sure. I didn't,
Because this sounds familiar.
it should be familiar. You were on the board at the time, so was Jane.
That doesn't mean that I remember it.
And I don't remember all the details here.
Okay,
So,
okay. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Fippard? Okay. Did you say that the proposed single-family residence on this lot would meet all the dimensional requirements, setbacks and all that?
yes,
What would be the square footage of it again?
the footprint is, at that time was 22 by 18, and it would probably be 2 stories. So it would have at least 2 bedrooms. And he mentioned to me he's looking at adding a single-car garage.
Okay,
And there's room for that on that side
On
of
the
the
lot.
lot.
without any more variances?
That's correct.
Okay. If the board members don't have any questions, I'll turn it over to the public to see if there's anybody who wants to speak in favor of this application. Did I see any? Seeing none, does anybody wish to speak in opposition to this application? Seeing nobody, okay. Last call for questions of the applicant. Seeing none, we can close the meeting, close the public hearing and move on towards deliberations. I think this should be somewhat straightforward since we had that just a couple of years ago.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just a
Yes.
reminder that for everyone to turn on their microphones.
Can
We've
you
had
not hear
some-
me? Mine's
Excuse me?
on.
Yes,
Am I not speaking loud enough?
yeah, we have had mentioned that some of the microphones haven't been turned on.
Okay. If the green light's on, that means it's on, right? It's on. Thank you, though. I don't see anything contrary to the public interest in regard to this application because it's merely asking for a variance to build a single-family home. And that certainly is not contrary to the public interest. And we heard that it was going to be a home within all the requirements of the lot size. So I don't see any issue in that regard. In terms of the spirit of the ordinance, we're looking at alteration of the essential character of the neighborhood and whether or not, if granted, the variance would pose a danger to public health, safety, or welfare. In the first instance, I don't see this altering the essential character of the neighborhood. It's a neighborhood full of similar lot sizes with similar dwellings constructed on them. So the neighborhood would not be altered in any fashion would be discernible. Similarly, I don't see any issue with respect to safety or danger to welfare or health. The third criterion Granting the variance will allow construction of an affordable housing unit for the owner and will do substantial justice for that owner without any harm to the public that I can see. So the balancing test favors granting this application. And I do think that the lot size here, again, is one of those unique features of the property in relation to what is sought to be put on it, the use to which it will be put. In other words, a single-family residence. And I would find that to be a special condition of the property that makes the application of the lot size ordinance unfair to this, or unduly burdensome to this owner. Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, on that point, you brought up earlier going under, now I've lost it, 5B, I think it is. I think this is appropriate, and when this, I do remember when this came before us, and my concerns that, again, that was raised in, or similar to what was raised in the previous application. However, in this application, I think it probably belongs under this, what I call if all else fails criteria. In other words, if this is not granted, is there another reasonable use that this property could be put to, other than merging with the abutting property, which doesn't seem to be on the table. So I would put forward that there does not seem to be any other reasonable use, so that when we do get to voting, we should look to Section B of the unnecessary hardship test. And I would also mention that as far as value goes, I think that we'd be hard pressed to argue that a new house on that lot probably would increase not just the value of that property, but the value of the neighborhood, as opposed to it being a storage lot for odds and ends.
Which would serve to diminish the values of those other
Right.
properties, right? Okay. I think I agree with all those comments. And anybody else have anything else? I see nodding heads, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. If that's the case, then I would entertain a motion if somebody wants to make it.
I'll give it a shot.
Certainly.
Make a motion to approve ZBA 2004-13,
2024.
2024-13, submitted by Jim Fippard, Brickstone Land Use Consultants, to request a variance for the property located at 0 Wetmore Street, tax map 116-032-001, in the high-density district owned by the Bergeron Family Revocable Trust, to request a permit on the building lot containing 5,544 square feet, where 6,000 square feet are required per Article 3.6.2, minimum lot size area of the zoning regulations.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Clough seconds that, all right. If the variance were granted, strike that, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Unanimous, 4-0. If the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. All those in favor? Again, 4-0. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. All those in favor? 4-0. If the variance were granted, the values of the surrounding properties would not be diminished. All those in favor? 4-0. Now, Attorney Taylor, I don't know how you want to approach this. You want to go right to B or vote on A first?
Well, excuse me, I think if we are in agreement that A doesn't apply, we can go directly to B.
I think B is more appropriate, and I do recall we did this last time with this case. For some reason, I remember that, which is why I asked Mr. Fibbert the question. But I'm happy to yield to anybody else's preferences. Straight to B. Consensus is straight to B, okay. If the criteria in subparagraph A are not established, an unnecessary hardship will be deemed to exist if and only if, owing to the special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, the property cannot be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance, and a variance is therefore necessary to enable a reasonable use of it. All those in favor? 4-0, unanimous. Now, on the main motion to approve, I won't read the whole thing, to approve 2024-13, all those in favor? Unanimous. 2020-14-13 is approved. We will take up 20, does anybody need a break while we're in between? Are we all set? Okay. We'll take up ZBA 2024-14. I'll briefly read that. The petitioner, Martine Fisk, requests a variance for property located at 10 Adams Court, tax map 590-006-000, and is in the low-density district. The petitioner requests a variance to permit a 16-foot by 19-foot deck on a lot that is non-conforming at 7,620 square feet where 10,000 square feet is required, making it unable to conform with the impervious coverage provision per Article 3.3.3 of the zoning regulations. Mr. Hayden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. 10 Adams Court is located in low density. Again, not to repeat, but it's 7,620 square feet where 10,000 is required. It's a single-family house, 1,401 square feet of living space. There are 3 variances on this property, or I should say 2 variances and 1 decision by the board. The first one was March 6, 1989, ZBA 89-14. It was a variance for lot coverage and setbacks, and that was denied. In August 6th of 1996, ZBA decided there was a change in the zoning ordinance for coverage requirements, relaxing those, which allowed them to move forward with a variance application in September 4th of 1996, ZBA 96-23, variance for a 1-foot setback approval for a garage.
And that was granted, you said?
That was granted, yes. Current proposal is there's a expansion of a deck area. They're going to take up a patio area and expand the deck out a little bit more. So I'll let the applicant speak to that. Jane?
Attorney Taylor.
You said there were 2 variances and 1 decision, or was that decision part of the variance?
So the March 6, 1989 variance was a denial, and then there was the August 6, 1996 decision. There was no case number, but a decision that there was enough to be heard again because of the change in the ordinance and the allowing for increased density percentage-wise.
Yes.
So does this proposal meet all the setback requirements?
This proposal would meet all of the setback requirements other than the lot coverage.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Fisk, you may proceed.
Good evening. This is my first time before the ZBA, so please forgive me if I'm not following procedures exactly correctly. Martine Fisk, 10 Adams Court. So 10 Adams Court is in a mixed neighborhood of single-family houses and multifamily conversions, right on the edge of going into a lot of multifamily homes and a mix. I've got about half of my neighbors are multifamily homes and about half are single-family. Ward 1, low density, one block off of Main Street on a dead-end street that terminates in the parking lot behind the Alpine Nursing Facility across from Keene State College. As Mr. Hagan said, it's 7,620 square feet. House was built in 1938. So it is my primary and only residence. Currently, there is a 22.5 by 8-foot stone patio in the rear yard. It's crumbling due to masonry failure, and it's becoming a hazard, a bit of an ankle twister, and I'm afraid of having, pieces collapse on it. Only 2/3 of that space can really be used because there's 2 steps down into the yard and 1 step up into the house. So with the narrowness of the space, it's about the width of a standard porch. I can just barely really fit 2 patio chairs, sort of Adirondack-style chairs in the center of the space, and then I've got a rain barrel at the end. It doesn't allow for any outdoor dining. If granted, this would be a 16 by 19 foot deck that would be built over the existing stone patio. Being a stone patio in the rear of the yard, I've been told that it would be exceedingly expensive and difficult to remove the stone patio. So I'm looking at building over it. The new deck would double the depth so that it's 16 feet instead of 8, and it would reduce the width to 19 feet so that it aligns with the side of the house. The existing stone patio actually goes beyond the edge of the house. It would meet all of the setback requirements with the side property, so that it's approximately 11 feet away from the property line, and it would be 37 feet away from the back property line with garden space and lawn in between. And it would allow for outdoor living space and entertaining space. The 2 houses that are nearest to the side property have the depths of their own backyards, and the owner on the rear, this is my rear yard, so it's surrounded by shrubs and by fencing, so it's not visible from the street. So I'm asking for a variance on 3.3.3 because it's already a non-conforming lot under 10,000 square feet. As it currently is set up, it's at 46% impervious, and I'm asking for an extra 152 square feet. The proposal isn't contrary to public interest because it does not infringe on the setbacks to the neighboring properties. The nearest neighbors to the proposed decks include 2 single-family owners who have included a letter of support. Nancy and Paul Vincent and Allison and Joe Lucas. The increase in impervious surface would be negligible at 2%, which sounds like a lot, but at 152 feet, it's really not. The spirit of the ordinance would be observed because it meets all of the setback requirements, and it's a very minimal increase of impervious surfaces. Substantial justice would be met because it keeps within the spirit of the code, given that the lot is 2,380 square feet below the minimum standards, and there's only 152 extra feet asked for impervious surfaces. This lot is a 2-bedroom home, so it could comfortably accommodate 4 people, but the patio space does not allow for more than 2 people on it currently. And certainly not for any visiting people. So a family and residents couldn't be in the patio all at the same time. I'm asking for reasonable enjoyment of property without intrusion of the space of the neighbors. The property values would not be diminished around me because I will not be encroaching on any of the required setbacks for the property. And so it would no way affect the use and enjoyment of the property of the neighbors. And the new deck would actually be further away from the side property. So there's that benefit as well. And as noted, the impervious surface is a negligible amount to the community, but of great value to me as the homeowner. The unnecessary hardships regarding the lot. So the lot already doesn't meet the zoning requirements for dimensions and sidings, 3.3.2 being 2,380 square feet short of the code, requiring 10,000. The non-conforming size already 1% over on the impervious surfaces. The garage, you'll see, if you look at the site map, is pushed quite far back to the rear of the property. And that really extends the length of the driveway. And that is quite an impervious surface addition right there. There's not much I can do regarding that. So that's a previous homeowner's pushback on that driveway is what really did it for the impervious surfaces, I believe. The purpose of protecting the neighboring properties from encroachment will be met, and it would, meeting all the side setbacks and minimal impervious surface increase. The use is reasonable for a two-bedroom home that could have 4 people in it. The existing space does not meet a reasonable use, with no way affecting the livability for any of the neighbors. Let's see. Then the property is also, gosh, I feel like I'm just repeating myself. It's pretty much all the same thing. Small lot, long driveway. It's only 152 square feet. So I'm going to just, rather than repeat myself one more time, I'll just leave it there.
Are you all set?
I am, thank you.
Okay, you ready for our questions?
I am.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions off the top? Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, just one quick question, looking at the picture. And I know you mentioned the.
You're talking about the photograph that I included that has the little yellow lines?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And you had mentioned the, expense of the removing the stone, which I fully understand, but I'm just curious what's gonna happen to the couple of feet or so of the stone patio that sort of extends out from where you're gonna wanna build the deck.
Right. So the plan is to remove all of the pieces that are not stable. So the picture that you see in the middle that has a planter on it, that corner is about to collapse. So that whole piece would be removed. And ideally, if I can get the builder to do it, I'd like to remove all of the stone patio that would be exposed from the deck. So that additional 3.5 feet by 8 feet, I would like to have removed. And then put in a little pad of brick. There's an existing sidewalk that is a brick on the side, and just give a sort of a step down onto brick. So I would be hopefully removing about half of that stone patio that would be exposed under the deck and replacing half of it with brick.
Thank you.
Wouldn't that improve your impervious coverage percentages?
I think it would, but I did not include that because I'm not sure that the builder
Right.
can do it. As you can see, it's a very irregular sized stone blocks. Some of them are very large.
One of the
and-
problems you can't tell from the picture is how deep does that block go down?
Exactly.
You don't know either.
I don't know either.
Okay.
And that's why I didn't include the removal of that, because I'm not sure if it can be reasonably done.
Okay, fair enough. So you're measuring the 152 square foot, I guess, increase from what's there now,
Yes,
plus if I'm understanding this correctly, your photographs with the yellow lines, the one above the one we were just talking about,
Yes,
it looks like it's shooting out greater or farther than the block, the stone block.
stone block.
You see the front picture at the top?
Yep, yep.
To the
So
left
you're
of
talking
you?
about the stone block that has the rain barrel sitting on top of it?
It's got the two or, looks like it's 3 Adirondack chairs.
2 Adirondack chairs,
Is it
yep.
2?
Yep.
Okay. I guess the table is a table to the end of that. So
Yeah, no,
that
yeah,
yellow
there's no
line,
table, there's a planter.
that yellow line extends out onto your grass or soil, whatever that is, right? Looks like it's
Correct.
rocks or
Yep,
or drainage there. That's going to be covered up. That
right.
yellow line area.
Yep, so if you go all the way down to the bottom photograph,
Yes.
so there'll be additional 8 feet that would cover over an old garden,
Yep.
and then it would be 8 by 19.
Okay.
So an additional 8 by 19. And as I said, I'm hoping to remove the stone, but I can't make any promises on the side.
So the problem with the impervious coverage comes in when you're basically covering up that old garden.
Covering up that old garden.
And
Yes.
that doesn't include removing that other piece we just talked about.
Correct.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions? None. Okay. I think I'm all, let me just take a look at this one more time.
If it's helpful, Mr. Chair, there is a plot plan that shows the jet out and the extension on page 93 of your packet.
This right here,
Yes.
yes. Now, Ms. Fisk, the two letters that we have in your application from the Lucases and the Vincents,
Correct.
are they immediate abutters or,
They are.
okay, can you just give me a direct?
The Lucases are immediately, let's see, if you're looking from 10 Adams Court at the front,
Yes.
from the front of the house, they are the rear neighbors on my left-hand side.
Okay.
On the east side. So their property line falls probably about 7 or 8 feet behind my existing patio to the side.
All
The
right.
Vincents are behind the garage. The space that is directly behind my patio is a rental unit. It changes out with students on a regular basis. I don't think that there's ever been the same person in that house for more than a season.
Okay. All right, thank you. If there are no other questions from the members, I would entertain questions, or not questions, but comments in support of the application from the public. Seeing none, I would entertain opposition to the application from the public. Seeing none, we can, last call for questions of the applicant. None? I always give the applicant the last chance to say something, so if you want to say anything that you can think of, but you haven't said it yet, and now's your chance.
Please?
Very good, all right. Thank you. We'll close the public hearing and go to deliberations. Yes, Attorney Taylor.
Yeah, I would think that the variance is not contrary to the public interest because it certainly doesn't conflict with the purpose of the ordinance, and it doesn't alter the essential character of the neighborhood, threaten public health, safety, or welfare, or interfere with anybody else's rights because it's solely behind the house on this property and quite a bit of a distance from any of the abutting structures or residents or anything else.
I agree with that. It's basically invisible. Any further remarks on that?
Well, I would say that slides into the spirit of the ordinance being observed.
Right. And given the minimal increase of 152 square feet, that may change depending on how lucky she is with the piece that sticks out. You know, and we can assume that that won't move anyway, so for purposes of the application. There's no threat to the public, health, safety, or welfare, and it will not alter the essential characters of the neighborhood, so I think that piece is met as well. On the substantial justice part, I think the applicant herself states it rather nicely in her application. The increase in impervious surfaces would be negligible amount to the community, but of great value to the homeowner. I think what she means is that her harm, if this were denied, would be significant with no appreciable gain to the public. That's how I see it. So I think she meets that criterion as well. I don't see how this would have any impact on property values other than improving her own property. And if her property is improved in terms of value, she'll naturally carry with it others in the area. Yes.
As far as the hardship is concerned, there's really not much of an opportunity where this property is located of changing its size to have a different proportion of impervious surface. And I would say even if you moved the proposed deck one way or another, it still wouldn't change the calculation.
Right.
So I think this is definitely a situation where the property itself creates the hardship, and this extra, was 152 square feet. Certainly, changing that in the impervious surface doesn't have any particular relationship to the limitation in the ordinance on this property.
I would agree with that, too. Any other comments from members? No? Okay. Certainly a motion would be in order with respect to 2024-14 at this point then.
Oh, I'll try it.
Mr. Clough?
I move that we approve ZBA 2024-14 petitioner Martine Fisk requesting a variance for property located at 10 Adams Court, tax map 590-006-000, and is in the low-density district. The variance is to permit a 16-foot by 19-foot deck on a lot that is non-conforming at 7,620 square feet, where 10,000 square feet is required, making it unable to conform with impervious coverage per Article 3.3.3 of the zoning regulations.
We have a motion by Mr. Clough and a second by Mr. Guyette. Thank you. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. All those in favor? That's unanimous, 4-0. If the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. That's unanimous, 4-0. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. That's unanimous, 4-0. If the variance were granted, the values of the values of the surrounding properties would not be diminished. That's 4-0. Owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, denial of the variance would result in an unnecessary hardship because no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property. All those in favor? 4-0. That passes, all right. Now, on the main motion to approve 2024-14, all those in favor? That's unanimous at 4-0. 2024-14 is approved. Good luck. So I asked this before, and nobody took me up on it. Does anybody need a break?
I could use.
Okay, let's
a quick
take
one.
5 minutes. All right, welcome back. We'll resume the meeting and call case number 2024-15. Mr. Hagan, if you don't mind, you have the floor.
Sure, Mr. Chair. You want to read the overall of what they're
Oh,
asking
yeah.
for first?
Sure. Petitioner Jason Reimers of BCM Environmental and Land Law PLLC of 41 School Street, representing Ryan Gagney of Live Free Recovery Services LLC, 9 Dunton Circle, Mount Vernon, New Hampshire, requests a variance for property located at 973 Marlborough Road, tax map 294-004-000, is in the rural district and is owned by BTD Properties LLC of 1 Main Street, Marlborough, New Hampshire. Petitioner requests a variance to permit a non-medical residential drug/alcohol treatment facility where such use is not permitted per Article 3.1.5 of the zoning regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
973 Marlborough Road, zoned rural, 1.1 acres, about 47,916 square feet. Currently, the last permitted uses were a school and a single-family house. Has 2,686 square feet of living space. The total building size is 4,462 square feet. This property has had several variances on it. It is important to note as well that it straddles, the property straddles 2 municipalities, Marlborough, New Hampshire, and Keene, New Hampshire. So the building sits about down the middle. You can see on the, we would have it up on the screen if our screens were working. But some of the variance came from that. There was one in 1990, December 3rd of 1990, probably not, the building that was there didn't pertain to this one, but ZBA 9048 was a variance for retail sales in the rural zone. It was withdrawn. February 3rd of 2003, ZBA 0304 actually had 2 variances on it. They voted it on them separately, but it was one ZBA number. The variance was for log home sales and a model log home. Both of those were approved. In November 3rd of 2003, ZBA 0317, there was a sign variance granted for change of location and increase of size. On April 4th, 2005, ZBA 0514 was an additional sign variance for additional square footage. That was also approved. Just important to note that the question may come up, being on 2 different properties, of how this is taken care of, and it is addressed under RSA 674:53 on how municipalities deal with properties that are in, that straddle 2 properties. So,
You mean 2 townships?
2 townships, yes, 2 municipalities, yeah. So just wanted to put that on the record.
What is that, just in summary? What does 674-15 tell us?
So it talks about Essentially, I won't go through the whole thing. It's a pretty lengthy and a little confusing, but essentially, it's an agreement or a letter of agreement on how to deal with it between the two municipalities. How do you deal with building permits? Who inspects what? How do you deal with zoning issues? After this, there's currently a letter to the town of Marlborough that the planning department is working on with an application that's a conditional use application that's been submitted. So they're working through that in the background while this variance is going.
So, and perhaps Jason will tell us and explain this to us during his presentation, but I read in the materials that Marlborough will subject this to a special exception requirement? Is that?
That is correct, yep.
Okay. Well, we'll save thunder for Jason.
Shall I begin?
Why don't you start from the beginning, and then you can work into that.
All right, actually, I'm going to start at the end, which was your exact, and then I'll go back to the beginning.
Okay, that's fine.
Jason Reimers, BCM Environmental and Land Law. Actually, it turns out I am going to start at the beginning. I represent the applicant, Live Free Recovery Services. Ryan Gagney is with me, and Tara Kessler is with me. We're seeking a variance from Section 3.1.5, which is the list of permitted uses in the rural district. And obviously, we're here because that list does not include residential drug alcohol facility. Before I address, well, to go back to how this is playing out in both municipalities. So we're here tonight asking for a variance. And we also need from Keene a conditional use permit, a congregate living and social service conditional use permit, and a congregate living and social service operating license. That license is renewed annually with the city of Keene. And then in Marlborough, we need a special exception from the ZBA and site plan approval from the planning board. And we have a joint hearing scheduled for, I believe, in about 2 weeks in Marlborough. And then additionally, the facility is licensed by the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services. And then what Mr. Hagan also alluded to in that statute having to do with, building permits and whatnot. There is a provision, and he alluded to a prior letter when it was the log home business, where the Marlborough Board of Selectmen essentially ceded their permitting authority to the city of Keene so that there was not duplicate building permit required inspections and all that.
But that's not true today, is it?
No, I don't believe it to be, because I believe
Okay.
that letter was specific to that
All right.
particular project. But I guess, I think Mr. Hagan was alluding to the fact that if we are able to get our approvals, that a similar or the same process might play out here. Is that correct? Okay. So before I address the variance criteria, I'd like Ryan to tell you about Live Free Recovery Services and the specific use that we are proposing tonight.
Good evening, Board, Chair. My name is Ryan Gagney, and I'm the owner and operator of Live Free Recovery Services. And we've been in operation in various forms since 2015. Excuse me, in late 2018, we sat down with Southwestern Community Services, where they had a vacant building that was located up on 881 Marlborough Road on the correctional facilities property. They were having trouble with a program that they had started without knowing the amount of substance use that people that were coming out of incarcerated facilities were underway of. So when they started the operation, they, with fantastic intentions, as all the staff that are there at that facility are, at that point in time, it was clear to them that this was a little bit outside of their scope. They shut the program down, and that building sat vacant. We had put just an opportunity to meet with everybody from Southwestern, and out of all the applicants, they chose us to operate there. And that was, again, back in early 2019, the end of 2018. Since then, we've actually developed a full continuum of care of substance use treatment here in Keene with several other locations that we had another sober living property that changed ownership, and the person that had started the program was looking to no longer participate in running the program. And it being a vital service for people finding housing, for recovery housing, especially in the housing crisis that we're in right now, anything that's affordable for people that are just getting on their feet didn't really exist too much until that property was established. And so instead of it closing, we took over the operation of that as well. And since then, we've operated at 361 Court Street as well, which is also in a residential neighborhood, and at I just blanked out, 106 Roxbury Street, which we were here for several months ago, and are very familiar with the congregate living license. We just attained our renewals, or 2 of our renewals from last year, and this particular location, we have a variety. We operate an outpatient facility at 17 Kit Street, and employ a variety of clinicians, psychiatric APRNs, and are very qualified and competent when it comes to substance abuse treatment. And also, it's important to note that we also don't have issues within the neighborhoods that we operate. We have neighbors that are less than 100 feet away from our driveway. We don't receive complaints from them. We work with our neighbors. We don't work against them. We're not there to cause any problems. We're there to add a service to the location that we provide in, and we take that very seriously. This particular location at 881, we have a full medical detox program. And so people are there to medically stabilize themselves from either drugs or alcohol. And after stepping out of that program, somebody does have to be medically cleared by our psychiatric nurse practitioner and medical director that they are appropriate to step down into what is called the next level of care. That next level of care is that person is not only medically stable, but also that they're just stable enough they're able to engage in treatment at this next juncture that they're in. Stepping into our outpatient, directly from detox into our outpatient program, sometimes can have challenges internally for the individuals, and this location would be something called a high-intensity residential program. That means that they are with a roughly 16-hour-a-day clinical programming throughout the day. They're 24 hours supervised. There is a good neighbor policy that was just handed out. Some of that wouldn't apply to this location, and because of the fact that they would not be moving to and from anywhere. They would be within the facility until they were ready to step down into another program. And so that's just to give, without going too far into to that, unless there was questions about that. That's really what this would be. This would be a higher level of care clinically and more supportive for those individuals. And after meeting with zoning over several weeks ago, we came to that this would probably be the best use and path moving forward for the use of the property.
All right, you mentioned your good neighbor policy and that it was just handed out.
Yes, sir.
I just want to point out that under our rules of procedure, anything given to us within 10 days of a public hearing is subject to acceptance by a majority vote of the board.
Okay.
So we'll take that up. If you want to speak to it, you can speak to it all you want.
Sure.
But for us to look at it and take it into the record, we'll vote on that before we vote on the criteria.
Very good.
My apologies for not getting it to you with the application. I didn't actually realize it was a written policy until.
Well, you can speak to it, because people talk about, the 5 criteria and anything else they want as well, so feel free to speak to it all you want, but I don't want to cut you short if you.
No, that,
Okay.
I mean, ultimately, I wanted just, again, to give a full circle summary of our, we have just several locations, and this isn't a new concept for us.
And if I read your materials correctly, this 16-hour per day program that's high intensity would be for an average 4 to 6 weeks per person,
That's correct.
in-house?
In-house.
Yep, okay.
Correct.
I think I've got the big picture on that.
And they would step into the lower levels, that would be part of being able to go into that program would be their willingness to engage in long-term treatment, which provides a better outcome for the individual.
And they decide when to step down by working with their clinicians, I assume, when they're ready.
They wouldn't, the professionals would
That's
help
what I
them.
mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay, yes, yes.
It'd be a collaborative thing, I suppose.
Correct.
Right, all right.
Correct.
So if there's any more background you want to provide, please feel free to do so. If not, we can let Jason give the legal stuff. Oh, Attorney Taylor, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know which one of you is best to answer this, but hopefully at some stage you'll go through what the actual uses internally of the two buildings is planned. I don't know which one of you wants to go into that.
Do you want to do that now?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I think I've been driving by this particular property for roughly about 3 years, and I've always wondered what was going on inside. It's a very unique location. Aesthetically, it's a very pretty building, and I can attest to that internally, the location matches its external. So if you're looking at the single, what seems to be the single-story ground level, that's longer against the, that is partitioned into, basically, if you could imagine a hallway that has offices all the way down. And there's roughly, I believe there's 9 offices that are in there, off the top of my head. And then you have the residential building itself. Some of those offices would be turned into bedrooms, and some of those would be turned into either group rooms or individual clinicians' offices. So this would be a program that's also has a very, it's commonly referred to as caseloads. The caseloads would be very low, meaning the client to clinician ratio. And so the clinical offices would be among some of the residential dwellings as well. And then the main building is also where some of the community activity, communal groups, there's a 2-story housing portion, that the residential building itself, and there's plenty of common space that's in there as well.
Yes.
So how many residential patients, I guess, or clients would you have at any one time?
We're here asking for roughly about 20. I have a feeling it will be less than that after you develop out the space itself. But 20 would be the maximum. And on a lower side, it would be anywhere down to 16, just because of I can't, until we get into architectural and engineer expenses, I can't, honestly give you that definite answer.
Yeah, I was curious because it looks like there are 5 or 6 offices on this plan, and of course, we only see the first level of the residential structure only shows 1 bedroom, and I'm trying to figure out how you fit
Yeah.
20.
There's another 2 upstairs as well.
Okay.
And then there's 2 large rooms that ideally could actually have a partition that goes through, creating the space if need be. But without even doing that, it would have the ability for offices needed as well as the residential component as well.
And would there be 24-hour staff?
Correct, there would be.
Okay.
Does it matter? It looks like, I can see that plan up there, and I'm looking at this photograph here which is, I think, the same thing with the big black and white dotted line going through it. That's the boundary line, I take it.
Correct.
Does it matter which side of the building the boundary line, or which side of the building is, let me rephrase it. Does it matter on which side the boundary line is, in terms of the uses that you'll put to it? So in other words, in the building with the offices, the long building, roughly, looks like about 3/4 of that is on the Marlboro side. Does it matter in terms of the uses?
We don't think it does.
Okay, I would agree.
We haven't seen anything in any of the ordinances that have suggested that. We did
Okay.
think about, whether we needed to put all the residents, in one town, or, it's things like that, but we haven't seen anything guiding that.
Then you're gonna have to issue passports after that.
Exactly. Right.
I think that makes sense, okay. Yeah, thank you.
It's certainly a unique, well, I'll get to that. Do you have any more questions?
I don't think so. Anybody have any questions, preliminary ones? I went back.
I'll start with
Go
the
for it.
variance criteria.
Sure.
As you know, the first two criteria are related and considered together. Those would be that the variance is not contrary to the public interest and will observe the spirit of the ordinance. And as you know, the two ways that the New Hampshire Supreme Court considers these is whether, or two different ways of looking at it, whether granting the variance would, one, either alter the essential character of the neighborhood, or two, threaten public health, safety, or welfare. And this variance will do neither. Starting with the character of the neighborhood, this is a unique building and property, partly in Keene, partly in Marlborough, close to downtown Marlborough. The property has had a varied use over the past few decades and is currently vacant. Live Free's proposed use is of similar intensity as previous commercial uses of the property. Since 1970s, the property has been used for commercial purposes. It was Bud and Dolly's restaurant. Then that building was torn down in the 80s. And then in the late 80s and early 90s, planning and zoning approvals were obtained for commercial uses of the site, such as a restaurant convenience store and a greenhouse retail space, but those plans never materialized. In 2003, the Monadnock Log Homes received approval to construct the existing building, which was used for several years as a model log home showroom and log home sales offices. The most recent use has been for a therapy clinic, an outpatient therapy clinic for youth diagnosed with autism and other developmental disabilities. And the sign, as you've probably seen, still advertises it as Patterns Behavioral Services.
Thank you.
The proposed use will generate minimal traffic. Residents are not permitted to have vehicles or leave the facility on their own. Most daily trips will be by the staff that will be present 24 hours a day. The staff will work in 3 shifts with 5 to 7 staff present during the first shift and no more than 5 staff present during the second and third shifts. We estimate an average of 30 vehicle trips to and from the site daily. And when a car leaves the site, that's 1 vehicle trip, and when a car comes back, that's another vehicle trip. So we're estimating 30 per day, which is consistent with a residential neighborhood, and given that this is located on 101, this traffic won't even be noticed. And by the way, the property does have 2 driveways that form a horseshoe, I guess you'd say. Residents of the facility will be supervised 24 hours a day and will have scheduled time for breaks outside in an existing fully enclosed outdoor area. There's actually 2 outdoor areas. There's an enclosed area on the Marlborough side, and then there's a rather large outdoor deck on the Keene side. But these places are not going to be, all the time smoking lounges in which residents can come and go as they please. Due to the high level of supervision and limited outside activities, the proposed use will not generate significant levels of noise or disturbance to surrounding properties. The people staying at the facility will be there voluntarily. They've already gone through detox program at another site, and many of them are there because they're covered by health insurance. Live Free has a well-thought-out good neighbor policy that that its residents are expected to abide by. I invite you to read it, but I just want a few sections stood out to me. One that stood out to me is it says, "We can show our neighbors that we are assets to the community. We are not drug houses or trap houses, but rather look at us as good neighbors and contributing members to society," end quote. Another quote that caught my attention was, "You represent the Live Free family. Even though you will successfully transition on, we plan to be here to continue our mission for generations. Think and act beyond yourself," end quote. And then the third one was, "Keep your voices lowered and be aware of subject matter. This is just as important on the deck and smoking area," end quote. I think those are examples of just a really thoughtful, good neighbor policy that's been revised over the years. Adding to this is the fact that the property and building are already well screened from neighboring properties. It's screened from the abutting property to the east by a solid wooden fence along the property line. The parcels to the south and the west are undeveloped and are densely forested and vegetated. And in the front, on the abutting 101, there are existing mature evergreen shrubs and trees between the roadway and the front of the site that partially screen the existing parking area and building from the roadway and abutters to the north. So in all, the proposed use will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Moving on to whether it would threaten public health, safety, or welfare, the amount of traffic will be low, as the residents won't have vehicles. All the residents are sober. The residents are supervised at all times. The applicant is installing sprinklers. The use will not strain emergency services. The number of police, fire, and EMS calls, this is combined, from all of Live Free's 4 facilities in Keene combined are about 6 to 8 per year. That's for 4 existing places, total of 6 to 8 calls per year.
And how many people does that involve?
It's a great question. For just a little bit of clarity to that, that doesn't include 881 being a medical facility, because that's a little bit different when it comes to the medical calls that we get. Sometimes some people are in medical crisis before they even come to us. They think it's a good idea to drive themselves to us, and we have to then have, hospital intervention or something like that. But this location in particular is talking about the facilities that operate with 361 Court Street, Roxbury Street, 17 Kit Street, as well as 26 Water Street.
So my question is, what's the total population of those 4 places?
Roughly, every per 30 days, roughly
Yeah.
64 individuals.
So 64 individuals, 6 to 8 calls a year, is that basically?
Yeah, about
Oh,
0.5 per month by the time that we went through and did, it was
Okay.
about 0.5 per month.
That's what I was getting at, thanks. Sorry, Jason, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
but
that's a good,
I didn't want to forget the question.
that's a good question. So, and the fact that Live Free's detox facility is about 1,000 feet away allows Live Free to better stabilize someone in need. And given that all of these individuals have already gone through that detox program, any symptoms experienced by a resident are likely going to be less severe because they're just at a further stage in their sobriety and they're not as acute.
Can we interrupt one more
Sure.
time? Attorney Taylor has a question
Okay.
for you.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding correctly, this facility is proposed to sort of be intermediate between the one that's on the grounds of the county jail and the 4 others
That's,
in Keene?
yes, quickly. And I know that this is, sometimes it's easy to me, and I always just assume it's easy to everybody, but I'm becoming painfully aware that it's not. 881 Marlborough Road is our 3.7 medical detox facility. And from there, we have 2 step-down locations that would be a step after this particular use that's proposed. The idea behind that is to better support individuals that maybe could use the additional support and also lengthen somebody's treatment episode, which also greatly improves their outcomes. 26 Water Street is their step down to just sober living. That's when they're fully gainfully employed. They are attending, recovery meetings and engaging with the community themselves, looking to further their employment and also gain residency within Keene. So a lot of our graduates from that program end up going on to become a part of our alumni program and rent apartments locally.
May I ask him a couple clarifying questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So is there, the category of use that we're proposing, do you currently have this exact
No.
one? Okay.
No, this would be an in-between the detox program and what currently exists at 2 of the locations.
Okay.
And so this would fill would it be fair to say that you've got 881
Correct.
Marlborough as perhaps the most in need?
Yes, it's.
And then you've got
Yeah.
these lower ones, and this is going to be the intermediate step
Correct.
that you don't have right now?
That'd be correct.
Could I ask?
Sure.
So, and which are the 2 facilities you say that you have that are, I guess they're still intermediate steps before they get to the sober living?
Sure, individuals that are residing at both 361 Court Street and Roxbury Street.
And if I could add, Ryan, you could correct me if I'm wrong, what differentiates this proposed facility from a group home where people are coming and going to work every day, they might receive support staff, is that in this facility, the residents won't be leaving. They'll be there 24 hours a day on site with clinicians providing clinical support for 16 hours a day and then supervision when they're sleeping or needing breaks. So there's not going to be coming and going from the site like you would in a normal, not normal, but a more traditional group home that we think of in a neighborhood. This would be residents living in the building, being able to go outside for breaks during scheduled times a day with supervision at every time of day.
I was talking about threatening public health, safety, or welfare, and for all the reasons that we've given, this simply will not threaten public health, safety, or welfare. Overall, helping these individuals transition to sober living is a major benefit to public health, safety, and welfare. So it's actually kind of the opposite. As the variance will not change the character of the neighborhood or threaten public health or safety, granting this variance will be in the spirit of the ordinance, and it will not be contrary to the public interest. Under the substantial justice prong, as Attorney Hoppick stated earlier, any loss to the individual that is not outweighed by a gain to the general public is an injustice. So here, denial of the variance will cause a loss to the applicant, the landowner, and the general public, with no corresponding gain to the general public. The loss to the applicant would be the loss of an opportunity to use this property for its important mission. Existing buildings suitable for this specialized use are not easy to find. This is a unique property and building in a unique location. And it being located 1,000 feet from the applicant's detox facility, it's perfectly located to suit the applicant's needs. The loss to the landowner would be that the sale of the property would fall through, and this property is unique and not well suited for most uses permitted in the rural district. It's not an easy property to sell. These losses would not be outweighed by any gain to the general public if the variance is denied. The general public needs and wants these services. Live Free's mission of assisting individuals to live sober lives is a benefit to the public and in furtherance of public health, safety, and welfare. If the variance is denied, the delivery of these services will be delayed while the applicant tries to find another suitable property. This would be a disservice to the general public. This property has long been used for commercial and therapy purposes, and it is currently vacant. Granting the variance will allow the applicant to use this existing building and property in a manner that is consistent with the long history of commercial uses of the parcel and in a way that will not adversely impact surrounding land uses. Therefore, this variance will do substantial justice, as there will be a loss to the applicant, the landowner, and the general public if the variance is denied, with no counterbalancing gain to the general public. Property values. We see no reason that surrounding property values would be diminished. The building is currently vacant, and it is a challenging building to use. And a vacant building is detrimental to a neighborhood. The proposed use will be similar, if not lesser in some ways, in intensity. And by lesser, I mean less parking, less traffic, as previous commercial uses of the parcel and other nearby commercial uses on Route 101. The most recent use was for outpatient therapy services. A lot of uses, which was an intensive use, traffic-wise, a lot of uses for this building require a variance, and our proposed use is less intense than some of the permitted uses, such as a kennel or a greenhouse nursery. The property is well kept currently, even though it's vacant, because it hasn't been vacant all that long, and the building is in good shape. Live Free will maintain this appearance. They expect to put about $150,000 into improving the building, and they've allocated, will allocate about $20,000 a year for maintenance. So this property will be well maintained. I'm talking about property values. So as I said, the residents will be there voluntarily and have already been through detox. And they will be supervised 24 hours a day and only be permitted outside of the building during scheduled times. The overall use of the property won't impact the neighbors, especially to the extent that property values would be diminished. Property values are not easily diminished. Live Free's got a great track record in Keene and Manchester, and there's nothing to suggest that it has diminished property values surrounding its existing properties. So for all these reasons, as well as the fact that the property is on a busy corridor near downtown Marlborough, the proposed use will not diminish surrounding property values. Unnecessary hardship. This has three components. First, whether the property has special conditions that distinguish it from other properties in the area. Second, whether those special conditions make it such that there is no fair and substantial reason to apply the prohibition of residential drug and alcohol facilities in the rural district to this particular property. And third, the use must be reasonable. Starting with special conditions. This is a textbook example of a property that is unique. And I usually try to avoid saying things like that, but in this case, it is truly unique. Both the property and the building are split by the town line. It is a residential building, but large enough to accommodate 20 beds and office space. It is in the rural district, yet it is on a busy highway. It is 1,000 feet from the applicant's detox facility. It has existing parking, actually more than necessary. It has an existing fully enclosed outdoor area. It has existing screening. It's long been used as a commercial property. And this use is somewhat similar to the, and similarly to the proposed use, it has also been used for therapy in the past. All of these are special conditions that set this property apart from any other property in the area. The second part of the unnecessary hardship test is whether there is a fair and substantial reason to apply the prohibition of residential drug and alcohol facilities to this particular property. Denying the variance will not further the purposes of the rural district. Therefore, there is no fair and substantial relationship. As stated in section 3.1.1, the purpose of the rural district is as follows. Excuse me. The rural district is intended to provide for areas of low-density development, predominantly of a residential or agricultural nature. These areas are generally outside of the valley floor, beyond where city water, sewer, and other services can be readily supplied. So here, denying this variance will not further these purposes. Denying the variance would not provide for an area of low-density development. This building already exists, and it has long been used for restaurant, commercial, and therapy uses. The purpose section that I just read also says that the rural district is intended to be, quote, predominantly of a residential or agricultural nature, end quote. And the proposed use will not change that. The word predominantly means that the residential and agricultural uses should be predominant, but that doesn't mean they must be exclusive. And this proposed use is residential in nature. Finally, the purpose section says that the district is generally outside of the valley floor, beyond where city water, sewer, and other city services can be readily supplied. There is a concern, that states a concern for extending city utilities into rural areas, but here the applicant doesn't need Keene's water or sewer. The property is connected to Marlborough's sewer system, and it has a well for water. So granting this variance will not compromise the purpose of the rural district of not requiring the expansion of city services. In all, granting this variance will not undermine the purposes of the rural district or the purposes behind this not including residential drug alcohol treatments in the permitted list of permitted uses. This is a unique situation, and this property is not representative of the rural district or its predominant aims. Finally, the proposed use is a reasonable use, providing an opportunity for people who have voluntarily gone through a detox program to spend 4 to 6 weeks living in a safe environment under 24-hour supervision while getting therapy is a reasonable use. Live Free has been successfully providing these services in Keene for years. The use is proven and reasonable, and their track record is terrific. In sum, the applicant would suffer an unnecessary hardship if the board denies the variance. Finally, there is the alternative unnecessary hardship test, which is whether a denial of the variance would render the property practically unusable for the purpose for which it is zoned. Here, a variance is necessary to enable a reasonable use of the property. As I've said, this property is unique in many ways and perfectly suited for this use. That the property needed past zoning relief exemplifies the unique nature of the property. And the fact that the property has even gotten zoning approvals for uses that never came to fruition, which I think further shows that many or all of the permitted uses are just not viable for this property. So for that reason, I say that the applicant satisfies the alternative unnecessary hardship test as well, in addition to the primary one. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Attorney Taylor?
Uncover my mic. Could you refresh my memory on the statement you made in the beginning about what Marlboro needs to do and when they're planning to review it?
Yeah. Marlboro, we need, they're having a joint, that statute that Mr. Hagan referred to provides for a joint hearing,
Joint by,
the Marlboro Planning Board and the Marlboro Zoning Board. And we need site plan approval. We've submitted these applications. We need site plan approval and a special exception for a group home in the district. I'm blanking on the name of the district in Marlboro, but residential district.
and when is that?
June 19th.
June 19th. Thank you.
And we also have, we've submitted applications to the Keene Planning Board, or no, to the Planning Board for the conditional use permit for the congregate living.
Yes.
What happens if if this is all approved and someone who is in this residential setting doesn't abide by the rules? Do they go back to your detox area if it's a substance issue?
Sure. Could you just be more, in what, how would they, if they didn't abide by rules?
Yeah, the rules that you
Yeah.
have for whatever it is in this facility.
So we would do what we do at any level of care. If you can't abide by the rules that are set forth for you, after a corrective conversation and the attempt to be able to corrective action plans, if the person is unwilling to do so, at that point in time, then we typically will work with other kind of crisis intervention spots so that that person isn't just put out on the street. We will, and then also at times when there's stuff that happens within the facility, maybe it's after hours, that person's gonna rest the rest of the evening, and we're gonna sort that out in the morning, when there's services that are open and available to them. We try to go above and beyond ever putting anybody to the sidewalk and said, here's your stuff and take care. It's not successful for the person, it's not successful for us, it's not successful for the immediate town. And so we work really hard to be able to mitigate those things, and that's also a professional standard that we have to do some things internally to make sure that we can intervene in we do relatively well at intervening with those crisis intervention moments.
But where does someone go if if you determine that things haven't worked out and they have to leave?
Sure. So we would work with, if somebody was actually at a discharge point, then we would work with one of the crisis intervention spots. We would look to maybe changing an address so that person has an opportunity to start new in a different program, and just look for what opportunities or services that person has available to them in that moment. It's always very. I would love to be able to give you a clear cut. If it's in the detox program, that's going to be very different. If it's in this particular one, we're going to look for crisis intervention spots, maybe the doorway, in certain other crisis spots that will be able to work with the individual and be able to get them to the services that they do, that they are willing to participate in. But the sidewalk is an absolute last, that's typically never, we can always typically navigate getting through that part.
By crisis spots, do you mean working with another
Agency, yeah,
to
other
relocate
agency.
that person?
Correct, yeah, other agencies that are more suited for those type of phone calls, something that needs to be immediate on the spot, and is willing to work with somebody regardless of, they may not meet our criteria for our rules and our desire for adherence to those, but maybe somebody else either has a lesser standard or they are willing to do something that, because of that intervention, the negative one of being held accountable to that, maybe they are now becoming willing to do something in a different program. That's how we handle that.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Will any of your placements be subject to court orders?
Be subject to court orders.
In other words, as a condition of release, let's say.
Not for a conditional, not for a condition of release. Sometimes somebody may have a legal precedent as far as that they would have to mandate, but they would still have to choose to be there. They would still have to participate and choose to be there. And we also we screen out. We have an extensive screening policy for certain things, certain criteria that would remove somebody from being an option to be able to come into the program.
For example?
Sex offenses,
Okay.
things of that nature, any type of violence, and those things are going to exclude somebody from being able to participate in those locations. We also operate, one of our facilities is directly across from not a parochial school, charter school, correct, thank you. From a charter school. We've never had incidents. Kids are outside playing ball all day long. Ball comes over the fence, ends up in our yard. Somebody's bringing it back over to them. We don't have issues with our neighbors. Those kind of things.
And I think it probably goes without saying, you don't allow weapons of any kind?
No, God, no. They're not allowed to have cell phones. Like any things that are allowed for possible intervention for that will participate in further drug use or anything like that. We mitigate
Okay.
all circumstances. Visitors are very rarely allowed. It's only with that are people that are engaging in family treatment. Those are the only ones that are allowed, and those are screened through the individual's clinician. They're not allowed till a little bit later into the treatment process if they're even approved. They have to be a healthy support.
Very good. Questions? Good, okay. I'm all set with questions myself. Let me just take this opportunity to ask the public if there's anybody here who wishes to speak in favor of this application, to please speak up. Is there anybody here who wishes to speak in opposition to this application? If you want to just step up to the microphone, hopefully that works okay.
Yeah, my name's Bruce Robbins. I live at 5 Main Street. I'm the abutting neighbor to this property. And I've heard a lot of talk about this property, about over what's been used there in the past. I've lived in Marlboro since 1993, and there's only been a couple of businesses there. A couple of the things that it was approved for were denied, what you guys are saying was approved for. The pizza place and the grocery store, the city of Keene didn't approve that for Glemonakis's, the one that owned Athens Pizza. They tried to open a store and a pizza place there, and they were denied. And when this guy built the building that's there now, he was approved from the city of Keene and the town of Marlboro to build that building. He got approval for certain plans. He changed those plans and added another sunroom on the back of that building, which is not in compliance with the wetlands. The foundation for the back of that building is almost in the brook. And what that's caused is when we get hard rain, the brook tries to go up where it normally used to go, where they filled it in and put the foundation. Now the water, when it's high, beats against the side of that building and floods my side yard. And I don't think this is a good place for rehab for people. You said on the paperwork that we were sent as a registered letter, this was a non-medical place.
Sir, just make your comments to the chair, not to him directly.
Yeah, they're saying it was a non-medical place. Tonight, they said it was a medical facility.
Okay.
And I disagree with it. And I own the property on all three sides of that property, and I feel this is going to lessen the value of my home and my property, which I'm retired and I'm trying to live on with the value of my property. Who's going to want to buy my house, a 4-bedroom home with a family and young children, and be next door to a detox place? I don't think anybody's going to want that. And who's going to buy my other land and build a house with a detox sitting right in the neighborhood? I live in a residential neighborhood. I didn't buy in a residential neighborhood so I could live next to a detox building. And the closed-in area that they talk about for a smoking area is no more than 10 feet from my property line on the side of my house where I spend a lot of time outdoors. I'm a non-smoker. The wind blows from the north side, and that's going to blow all of that cigarette smoke right into my yard. So I disagree with what they've come up with some of the things that it's been used for, because I've lived there since 1993. That building didn't exist when I moved there. And I think it's an awful thing. Is there going to be any security at the building? They said they're going to have people there, but what if somebody goes berserk that's trying to get off drugs or alcohol, and they go berserk? Who are they going to hurt in the neighborhood? This thing is right on my doorstep. I asked this committee to vote against this. This is a residential neighborhood. This is Main Street in Marlboro. We don't need this. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak in opposition? Just state your name and where you live and go ahead.
My name is Ryan Ben. I'm at 976 Marlborough Road in Keene. I guess my main thing is that they say that it's not going to harm property value, but I just don't see how it couldn't. Just personally, because I've only lived there for about 4.5 years, and if you had told me that this is going to be moving in next door, 4.5 years later, I can tell you I either wouldn't have bought it, or I certainly would have asked for reduced price. Yeah, I guess it's basically it. I would also say that I'm on call, so I'm gone for 30 hours at a time, and I don't know if I'm totally comfortable with that, being that my wife will be there alone for 30-hour stretches. I guess that's all.
Thank you. Anybody else in opposition that wishes to speak? Okay, seeing none. Would you like to respond?
I would.
All right.
So this is not a detox facility, and it's not a medical facility. It is non-medical, non-detox for people who have already gone through a detox program and then have been medically cleared by professionals, and then they have voluntarily and would voluntarily enter this facility. So the neighborhood would not be getting a detox place. The smoking area, and Ryan, jump in here whenever you want. The smoking area that Mr. Robbins referred to being on the Marlboro side of the property, Ryan is willing to work with any neighbors to make this work. And the smoking area does not need to be over here. it could be over here. And with regard to the smoking area, this is not a place, these people are supervised 24 hours a day. This isn't like a place where 20 people are just, hanging out, living together for 4 to 6 weeks and are going to spend all of their time outside on the deck smoking. These people are in intensive group sessions, 16 hours a day. They are supervised on their breaks. And so the notion that you're going to get 20 people hanging out here smoking cigarettes all day and night is just not the case.
I'd also like to add the smoking portion. I mean, most of those things, part of becoming a part of any type of community is working with neighbors. We have a history of working with neighbors to move property lines because there was trees that were impacting neighbors' houses here in Keene and also in Manchester, and these kind of accommodations. As well as if there's water damage being created by the property that I own, I'm then at that point in time obligated to at least look at ways to help with mitigating that if possible. I have no idea with the history of previous owners of anything that was done to or not in code of, but that's not an impact that I want to have on any type of community. It's not one that I've had on any community. And then also to the point of the staff as far as somebody that needs to be, or I think the comment was security. We don't have security. We have staff that are on site that are trained and able to handle these kind of situations. If that was going to be something that would be a prevalent problem, we would probably be having a different. Some member of the board would probably bring up an incident that had taken place that was reportable here now. I would be hard pressed to find one that could do that because they don't exist. And property values, I completely understand the viewpoint of that. I can tell you that the property values of our locations, we've added to the property values of our neighbors. Court Street was falling apart. We've literally step by step had a clear plan to reestablish that program or that property. A roof just went on over the summer. A complete landscape plan has been done for the outside, coming over to make sure that there's any approvals that are needed for it. This is something that is very common for us. I looked at these properties to be something that supports our clients in a manner that is with integrity. That requires funding to the property itself, which is a benefit to our neighbors. It's not a hindrance to our neighbors. You can't find a property that's next to any one of our locations, including Manchester, that has not increased in value. Can't do it. It's impossible.
I would just also add that, like Ryan said, you'd be hard pressed to find an example of someone going quote unquote berserk. It's just, this is a home staffed by professionals who are trained to deal with situations if they arise. And so while I understand people having concerns about something new like this in the neighborhood, there's nothing to support those either factually with Live Free's experience, and there's nothing to support that those fears actually coming to fruition. And I didn't include this with our application, but Tara found this study in 2019 by the National Bureau of Economic Research in Cambridge, and I'll read you one line from the abstract, which says that this looked into whether substance use disorder treatment centers and their relation to property values. And in the abstract it says, when we find no evidence that substance use disorder treatment centers affect property values. So just anecdotally, having concerns is not the same as property values actually being diminished. And I also, and I actually remember a case that I had with you years ago, and I recall that you zoning board members were this had to do with a homeless shelter. And you were very careful not to base your decision on, the character, the inferred character of the people who might be there. People with substance abuse disorders are protected class under the Fair Housing Act, and there is just nothing here to support the fear that someone's going to go berserk and do anything in the neighborhood, because the track record is there.
The other effective thing I think it's important to note is that we've had our neighbors, we've had complete open lines of communication. They can call my cell phone, that number is provided, my email, direct staff that are right there on site. They have those phone numbers as well. And there's a at Court Street we ran through because of the concern. These are valid concerns, and if I didn't know what I know, I would probably have those concerns as well. Just because they're concerns doesn't always mean that they're based in fact. And what I found was that working with the neighbors around Court Street, it's a very, very densely populated neighborhood, if you're familiar with Court Street.
Yep.
It's also, the neighbors are not afraid to make their opinions aware of exactly how they feel about situations. I will tell you that we do not have incident at Court Street, and those neighbors are incredibly close to our property line. If these things were, if inferred damage was going to take place, they would already be there. That's a lesser care. They have more freedoms to go out and do these things. They would already those problems would already exist because they have more opportunity to do that. Less opportunity would imply that there's less chance of that to take place. And so, the spirit of this would be more so of open line of communication to work through anything that ever came up or a concern, whether it's real or not. Oftentimes we get a phone call and it's because of a rooming house that's across the street that the complaint is that there's partying going on, and it's assumed that it's us. And oftentimes the reality is it's the house across the street. And it's not actually our clients. It doesn't happen. And so that same willingness to have an open line of communication would exist for these neighbors as well.
And isn't it fair to say that at no time will you have less than 5 staff members present?
That's correct.
Okay.
And if I could add, the City of Keene does have an annual review process through its operating license that will
Right.
hold this type of facility accountable, which Live Free has been held accountable for the past year that this licensing process has taken effect.
And even more noted to that, this is also a facility that's going to be licensed by state DHHS, which is of the highest licensure that we could come up with. So if we're going to get our clinicians, our medical staff, anybody that's within our facilities, their license become under scrutiny of the license from DHHS for this facility. So anything that we do would have to abide by that licensure. And I can tell you that if we're not adhering to that, our doors are closed with a snap of a finger.
Can you explain how this is non-medical?
Sure. The portion of this which it oftentimes gets confused is that the medical nature of this is that when somebody is excuse me, when somebody is referred into for medical stabilization, before they come to us, they have to be non-institutional referral, meaning that they don't require a hospital level of care. If they require a hospital level of care, we cannot admit them. So that's even at our medical facility. At that point in time, that person is typically removed of or separated from certain drugs using some types of prescription drugs that there's a taper that at some point in time that they're cleared for. Then at that point in time, they would step into this facility where they would engage in clinical treatment. Our idea for this is to have more of a smaller, specialized program for these individuals to be able to engage in specialized treatment so that they have, whether it's talk therapy, group therapies, and very, very honed life skills for these individuals that typically are referred to, it's for individuals that maybe they haven't had the life skills that some of us have had. And it's an opportunity to be able to really focus in on what it is that they need as individuals and be able to provide that for them. And so that's the level of care that this is. It's non-medical. They may be on medications, but that's, if you're on diabetes, I can't, if you have diabetes, I can't deny you at the program. We have to help you in that process. If you have anxiety or generalized anxiety disorder or generalized depression disorder, you also will get prescribed medications. There's likely people in this room that are on those right now. None of us know about that.
Or that ought to be.
There you go, right? Hopefully somebody can help me after this. But they, afterward, you'll be in a position where it's like you don't know that, but you help those individuals with that, and maybe that's what somebody really needs. Maybe that they haven't been on those medications, and somebody can evaluate them and make a recommendation for them to be able to see a prescriber for that. And that's the idea for these people, is to be able to really get a foothold and to have a lot of supervision and a lot of care with people on a more individualized, small caseload basis. I view this as very similar to programs that we've done. We go over the top, and we take it very, very seriously for this exact reason. Like, I would want someone to do that for my own loved one that needed help, and also if I was in the neighborhood where this was taking place, I would hope that the facility that did this was really taking the thought and consideration that we do in that process.
Okay.
So unlike the detox facility, it's non-medical in the sense that medicine is not being used to help get these people
Correct.
to stop using drugs or alcohol.
That's correct. They've already made it through that process.
But on a side point, if somebody's there who's detoxed but requires medical treatment for something else,
Sure.
anxiety or depression or whatever it is, they would get that from an outside, their own PCP, let's say, or whoever?
No, we would have an internal prescriber. So we have somebody that would be able to be an internal prescriber that they could see. Again, like our detox facility is 1,000 feet up the road. If you have anything that's an issue, that there's simply about a 45-second car ride to be able to walk into, sit down with an APRN or a registered nurse that's sitting there, that's licensed with the Board of Medicine of the state of New Hampshire, and be able to have those kind of conversations.
Okay.
Which is also just an added benefit, as a lot of residential facilities that I'm proposing don't have that as an opportunity, that medical staff is also staffed at that building 24/7. There's a registered nurse on staff 24/7, sometimes two during the day, with a psychiatric APRN.
Do members have any questions as a result of comments and response? Okay, seeing none. Do you have anything further you want to add before you close out?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Brian,
So what we'll do is close the public hearing and begin our deliberation. Let's take this out. Before we start the deliberations, but we don't need the public hearing to address this. We've received a handout, one-page handout. Under our policy, we're supposed to get these 10 days prior to this meeting. If an applicant or an applicant's agent submits supplemental information pertaining to an application within 10 days prior to the public hearing at which the application is to be heard, the board shall consider during the meeting and decide by majority vote whether to accept the supplemental information in consideration at the meeting, or to continue the application to the next scheduled meeting to allow adequate time to review the supplemental information. So I guess really the only question is, we don't need to continue this hearing, in my opinion. Should we vote to accept this piece of paper, consider it tonight, or not accept it?
Yeah, I would move that we accept this addressing neighborhood concerns policy from Live Free Sober Living into the record.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
4-0, we'll accept the policy, and I don't know if any of you had a chance to read. We can take a couple of minutes now to read it, if nobody has. I've read it, and I'm happy with leaving it the way it is. So we can begin our deliberations now then, with that taken care of, piece of housekeeping. I don't see how granting this variance will be contrary to the public interest in terms of violating basic zoning objectives. This use will be, as we've heard, the property is currently vacant. It's got a history of commercial use. I don't know what happened to the log home business, but I remember being there and being active, driving by many times. Our concern is whether this proposal use, which is not permitted in this zone, violates basic zoning objectives. A kennel and other uses that were mentioned would be more busy, I guess, more of an impact in the area than this would. I'm impressed that there's likely a very low traffic impact here, and the proposed use would impact less than a restaurant, or less than a kennel, less than a variety of other uses that are permitted. So I don't think it violates the basic zoning objective in terms of being contrary to the public interest.
Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt your deliberations. There was a letter that was submitted on Friday from an abutting neighbor.
Where's that?
That didn't get into your packets because it was submitted on Friday, the 31st. I do have a copy of it here. If you want to,
This was submitted on Friday?
It was, yes.
And this is it right here?
That is it.
Do we have a copy for everybody?
We do not have a copy for everybody, Mr. Chair.
I guess what I can do is pass that around and let everybody take a look at it then.
Sure.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, you'll also have to read it into the minutes as well.
Well, I think we have to move to accept it first.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. It's the applicant or the applicant's agent, right?
Right, but it doesn't apply, so I think we just have to read it.
So what I'm going to do is read it into the records, because we don't think that this needs to be voted on. Plus, it was received Friday, right? It was received. All right.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
So this is a memo dated June 3rd, 2024. It is from Bonnie Delano and, I'm not sure I understand what the rest of that means, Brenda Sherwin, daughters, POA for Dorothy Wilcox. POA would be power of attorney for Dorothy Wilcox, of 974 Marlborough Road, Keene. And then there's a carbon copy of an email address. The subject concerns ZBA 2024-15, variance to permit a non-medical residential drug/alcohol treatment facility at 973 Marlborough Road, tax map 294-004-000. The memo reads as follows, and I quote, "On behalf of our 102-year-old mother, Dorothy Wilcox, whose property abuts this proposed facility, we ask the following concerns be addressed and considered regarding the above variance request. Dorothy has lived at 974 Marlborough Road for over 70 years and has raised 5 children in her home. For a large portion of that time, 973 Marlborough Road was a vacant lot. She has always earmarked the future sale of her home to be what she will use to live on once she is no longer able to live by herself. By allowing a drug alcohol treatment facility beside her, it will most definitely impact the value and the profits when the house is sold. How will she be compensated for this revenue loss? As the value of the home at 974 Marlborough Road will be negatively impacted, a reevaluation for tax assessment needs to be and should be made. Although we appreciate the facility will be staffed 24/7, and all efforts will be made to ensure the safety of the facility residents and the neighboring property owners, nothing is foolproof. If a resident of said facility causes damage to Dorothy's home or is injured or worse on her property, who is legally and financially responsible? That is the extent of the letter. Now, do you want to give this to Corinne so she can put it in the record?
We do have a copy for the record,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, and I would suggest potentially opening the
Yep.
public hearing because this came after the.
Yes. Now, I will reopen the public hearing to see if the applicant wants to address that or not. Jason, if you want to just have a seat and address it, that's your call.
Yes, I do. Just briefly, I understand their seeing this as a concern. But again, there's nothing to support the assertion that this will impact Ms. Wilcox's property's value. As far as who is legally responsible for example, someone leaving the house and getting hurt on her property, I don't think that's part of a variance. And as you know, the most difficult questions to answer as a lawyer are when people kind of throw out like, well, what about liability? I mean, she certainly would not be liable for someone else hurting themselves unless she had some kind of obvious danger on her property, which I don't think is the case. So I don't want to belabor this point, but I don't think that nothing is foolproof in life. That's true, but there is no track record here of people just wandering away, or sober people wandering and getting hurt or causing damage to neighboring properties of Live Free Recovery Services homes. So I don't think that the concerns stated in the letter, while valid concerns, change the variance calculus at all.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions, comments as a result of this? All right, good. We'll close the public hearing again and resume deliberations. I guess I'm going to comment on the second criteria. If the variance is granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. This criterion goes to the two factors that seem to be implicated most here. Will it alter the essential character of the neighborhood, and will it jeopardize public health, safety, or welfare? Now, I'm of the school where I like to see something concrete, some evidence of a position. Lacking any evidence of it, I'd like to see more than speculation. And, to a degree, we bring our personal experiences to this board, which we're allowed to do. I've had a number of cases in my professional life as a lawyer dealing with these kind of facilities, advocating for them and fighting against them. So I've seen both sides of the equation. And one of the things that I always see are people speculating about what I call the parade of horribles. There's an assumption that people in recovery are potentially dangerous. I have not seen that to be true, and there's no evidence in this case where that even remotely can be taken as a serious fact. People who are in recovery are there because they want to be, and they've made a couple of steps to get where they're going to be at this level, where this facility is, the intermediate place. That shows that they've made progress to a degree, and they're continuing to make progress. And if the program is effective, as we heard, then they'll continue to do so and step down as they go. So I don't buy the argument that granting this variance would create a public health or safety risk in any neighborhood. So that, and the corollary to that is that there's no danger to the public welfare or safety, in my opinion. And in terms of the essential character of the neighborhood, we're not seeing any evidence that the physical structure of the place will change. The only thing that may need to be addressed is the location of the outside smoking area. Now, I heard the applicant say, well, we can, work with that, and the property is large enough to work with it. I'm not a particular fan of smoking. If it were my property, I'd just ban it altogether, but it's not my call. That would solve the problem. No smoking property, period. That's true at the hospital, it's true at any clinic, it's true at a school, it's true on the city property. It's an easy fix, but that's not what you do in a rehab facility. But what I heard the applicant say was they'll work with the neighbors on that, and I believe him. So I think aside from that one minor issue, I would be prepared to say granting this variance would not violate the spirit of the ordinance. It would be observed, in other words. Granting the variance, will it do substantial justice? What is the harm to the public in this being granted? And everything what I just said about public health and safety and welfare is applicable here. I don't see any evidence that there's going to be this great harm befalling the neighborhood or the city or anywhere else. And I see a loss to the individual, a couple of individuals here, the owner, the applicant, and the general public at large. These facilities are needed in this society today. And I would support the finding that this factor has been met. Now, property values. We've heard a couple of comments about property values. And it's in my experience doing this kind of work, and it's been pretty long for a while, I've seen people come in with letters from realtors, letters from real estate appraisers, and just their gut opinions. Tonight, we heard opinions from several people who wrote us and who spoke, and I don't doubt the sincerity of their beliefs, but I just question the basis for it. And what we heard from the applicant, and perhaps I don't think I'm putting too much weight on what the applicant says, because he has the track record, and I'm aware of some of that track record, because I've been involved in some of those cases, collaterally or not. And I don't see the negative impact, and especially on the one on Court Street, right up the road here, by not too far from the hospital. Before Live Free took over that place, another outfit went in, the neighbors went nuts, and it was shut, this board shut it down, and they did not grant the variance for them. They did for this outfit, and I think I know why, and I wasn't on the board then. But the track record that this applicant has demonstrated leads me to believe that they do know what they're doing, and they will operate in a manner that will not allow property values to diminish, that they will listen to their neighbors, and they bothered to hand out a policy about it, and I think it's thorough, and I think they mean it. And I would use that as evidence to support my conviction that granting this variance would not diminish the values of the surrounding properties. Now, insofar as the last criterion is concerned, unnecessary hardship, I think Mr. Reimers nailed the three-part test pretty thoroughly. There are special conditions of this property, and some I've never seen before. A town line running right through the middle of a building is one, with 1.1 acres on one side and almost an acre on the other. These competing regulatory requirements of two different towns. The size of one building with so many offices that can be easily converted into residential units with sufficient bathrooms. And the fact that it's on a main thoroughfare, Route 101. Those are all unique conditions or special conditions, which makes the application of a prohibition of this type of use somewhat nonsensical, or at least unreasonable. Because I think the use they propose is reasonable in this location. The fact that it's located so close to another facility owned by the same applicant, I think is just a coincidence and a plus for them. I don't think it's really a special condition factor, but I heard what he said about the availability of medical treatment so close to the place. So I would be in support of this application and in support of granting it for all those reasons. Mr. Hagan, did I cover them all?
You did a great job, Mr. Chair.
Well, I don't know about a great job, but I covered them all. Does anybody else want to comment on this?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just a brief comment that I do agree with your assessment, well said. I'd also add that as far as residents, they're controlled primarily inside the facility. There's a smoking area that's an outside area, of course, but those folks are not going to be wandering about the property. That's what I heard from the applicant as well. So
Me
I just
too.
wanted to add that factor to your comments. Thank you.
Well stated. I do believe you're right. Attorney Taylor.
Yeah, I think also that the proposed use as part of this unnecessary hardship test is reasonable, except for a brief period of time. My understanding is that this property has really never been used for the purposes that are defined, at least on the Keene side of the building. I can't speak for what it's, the Marlboro side of the zoning might be. So I do think that the use is reasonable, at least as reasonable as any of the prior uses have been.
And at least as reasonable and less impactful than a lot of the permitted uses, I would just add. Anything more? Mr. Clough, are you thinking, or you're all set? Okay, good. All right, so, having deliberated, I think we can entertain a motion if somebody wants to make one. Missing a page here. Ah, here it is. Yes.
I'd like to move that we approve a variance for Live-Free Recovery Services LLC for property located at 973 Marlborough Road, tax map 294-004-000, which is in the rural district, and is requesting a variance to permit non-medical residential alcohol treatment facility where such use is not permitted per Article 3.1.5 of the zoning regulations. And I would like to add a condition that our approval is contingent on the applicant receiving all approvals from Marlboro.
Do you want to make that from Marlboro and from Keene?
Okay, Marlboro and as may be required by Keene and by the state of New Hampshire.
Right. Perfect. Mr. Clough?
I'll second it.
All right. So the motion is to approve, subject to conditions of approval from Marlboro, Keene, and the state. Are there any further questions, or anybody else want to make comments before we proceed to voting? All right. Excellent. Granting the variance is not contrary to the public interest. All those in favor? 4-0. If the variance is granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. All those in favor? 4-0. Granting the variance will do substantial justice. All those in favor? 4-0. Granting the variance will not diminish the values of surrounding properties. All those in favor? Unanimous, 4-0. Denial of the variance would cause an unnecessary hardship. I don't need to read more than that, do I? My throat is getting sore. All those in favor? 4-0. And the use is reasonable. Unanimous. So on the main motion to approve 2024-15, all those in favor? It's approved unanimously. Last one up is 2024-16. And since it's 9:41, we beat the, that's the good news. Thanks for waiting.
Yeah, thank you for staying open. Oh, sure. Sure.
Let me just read the part that I'm supposed to read before I turn it over to Mr. Hagan. ZBA 2024-16, the petitioner Heather Francisco, am I pronouncing that right? Okay, thank you. Requests a variance for property located at 271 Elm Street, tax map 536-086-000, and is in the medium density district. The petitioner requests a variance to turn a single-family home with an accessory dwelling unit into a two-family home on a lot with 11,325.6 square feet, where 13,400 square feet is required per Article 3.5.2 of the zoning regulations. Mr. Hagan, want to give us the background on this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 271 Elm Street, again, zoned medium density, .26. I don't need to go over the square footage again. Confirming it is a single family with an ADU, and it is currently conforming with all current requirements. The couple of notes, it's indicated it has been a single family home since 1979. In 2017, the owner obtained a permit to have the ADU, and there are currently no ZBA cases that I could find in the file. If it's helpful, I was going to read the specific defined ADU, what it is, if it's
Anything's
helpful.
helpful at this hour.
Sure. So an ADU is an independent living ancillary to a single-family dwelling and under the same ownership as the principal dwelling unit. The unit may be attached accessory dwelling unit located within the attached to the primary dwelling unit, or a detached ADU located in or as a detached accessory building on the property.
Okay, so so I'm straight, the lot that it's on right now is 11,325.6 square feet,
Correct.
and she needs 13,400 feet to do what she wants to do.
To make it a two-family,
Right.
correct,
And
instead of
that's
an
a
ADU.
And that's a shortage of 2,074.4 feet, square feet?
That is correct.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, what section is that?
That is 8.42 A. So 8.42, specific use standards, accessory, which is A.
Thank you.
No problem.
Ms. Francisco, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First, I want to thank everyone who's answered so many of my questions. They really went out of their way and did a great job. This has been a hard process for me to understand. So I am petitioning for this variance as a way to address Keene's housing crisis in general. 270, I'm the owner of 271. It's currently designated as a single family with an ADU. At the end of this month, I will be moving out of the home, 11 minutes away to Gilsum. And at that time, the two families that have school-aged children who currently reside in the building, one that shares a unit with me, and then a family, a husband and wife and a small child on the first floor that have that apartment independently, will have to vacate. Because with the ADU, I have to reside in one of the units in order to rent the house out. So they will not be permitted to stay. And technically, they will be considered homeless at that time. They're both working-class families. Everyone I've rented to has been nurses, other professionals. It's people, the neighborhood is like a people for, middle class, lower middle class or working class people who do enough to get their bills paid on time, but don't really have the luxury at the drop of a 30-day notice to pay for a security and a new place to live for themselves and their children. There's really not a lot of two-bedroom rentals available in Keene, and the families work there and their children go to school at the school that's closest to 271 Elm Street. So 271, as was mentioned, it was built in 1920 as a two-family home, and I bought it 100 years later in 2020 during COVID, when it was in very poor shape and it had been vacant for a number of years. And I believed it was a two-family home. I didn't know until recently it was designated as a one-family with an ADU. If I had known that, I would not have put the families in danger of losing their housing if I moved out to begin with. To go through my application, the property location at 271 Elm Street, Keene, is located in a medium-density neighborhood with single-family, multifamilies, commercial, and government housing. I, Heather Francisco, am a resident and owner. The purpose and effect of the proposed variance is to change the property as a designation from a single-family ADU to a two-family property. Justification for the proposed variance is that 271 Elm was originally built to be a two-family home and has been used to house two separate households since I purchased it. 271 Elm has square footage for 4 parking spaces, which are all currently in use. 271 Elm actually has 2 addresses on some paperwork, 271 and 273. It has 2 separate apartments. One apartment is 807 square feet and includes 2 bedrooms, separate dining and living room, kitchen, bath, and laundry room. The other apartment is 598.26 square feet and includes all of the above. However, it has a larger bath that includes a laundry room. Both apartments have covered porches, storage areas in the basement, and minimums of 2 parking spaces. Each apartment has a separate heating system and utilities. 271 Elm's lot size is 11,325.6 square feet and includes a 15-foot by 80-foot long driveway area. The square footage falls short of the required 13,400 square foot requirement. However, there is room for plenty of parking and also a ramp for the first floor apartment if need be. Since 2020, I have received a great deal of positive reinforcement from neighborhood and community members. Multiple community members have shared that 271 has formerly been referred to in a negative light and in ill repair. Quickly after I rehabbed the property, the home directly across the street was completely gutted and remodeled. Next, the other property directly across the street had an exterior remodel. Lastly, the 2 abutting vacant lots had been used as a dumping ground for construction waste were purchased and a large, beautiful home was built. Another abutting property had an exterior remodel just before the newest house was built. All of this development happened in the 3 years following the exterior rehab after my purchase of 271 Elm. During all these years, 271 Elm housed 2 separate families. And 2 separate families being able to be housed has done nothing to harm the neighborhood. It's really helped with the improvement and upkeep of the property. 271 is now an attractive modern 2-family home that houses 2 young families with children. If the variance is granted, in the spirit of the ordinance would be observed because 2 middle-class families who care for the property would remain living at 271 Elm. The yard is sizable and there is room for its covered porches, gardens, parking, and safe play away from the street. During the times I have advertised the bottom unit for rent, I have received well over 100 inquiries. Most of the inquiries arrive with lengthy explanations of circumstances of hardship finding housing in Keene, especially 2-bedroom housing in close proximity to the hospitals and schools. I know firsthand how difficult it is for Keene residents to find affordable housing, even unaffordable housing. There are several abutting properties that are distinguished as multifamilies abutting my property. One has a lot significantly smaller than 271's. Another lot is not deemed large enough for a 2-family, however, it actually has a 3-family home on it. I have marked a map listing all abutting multifamilies and commercial properties just a bit further than 200 feet. Following my purchase and use of 271 Elm as a 2-family, 4 directly abutting properties invested a great deal of money in their properties. The other 3 invested in landscaping and painting of their homes. I guess it's not technically legal through the city of Keene, but I see 271 already used as a 2-family home, like it was originally built. Denial of the ordinance would immediately make 2 families homeless with a 30-day notice. it would cause the property to sit vacant for the entirety of my owning it, because I will be moving out at the end of June. And as it is designated now as a single family with an ADU, if I do not live in one unit, no one can live in the other. I am able to let it sit vacant, but 271 sitting vacant would be immediately recognizable to Keene residents. The proposed use is reasonable because 271 has already been used as a two-family since I purchased it in 2020. Another unnecessary hardship would be to residents of Keene. Denial would immediately prevent Keene residents from having access to affordable multi-bedroom housing located near good schools with ample yard space for their children to play in. This would be seen as nothing but unnecessary hardship during Keene's housing crisis. The square footage of the yard, I had this wrong. I had written 768 square feet when I did the math, but it's really over 2,000 square feet. It's 2,000 square feet less than currently required for a two-family without a variance. Both apartments provide ample space for two families. The lot provides ample space for parking. So I have underneath that the abutters list, and I have a map of the property that shows where the driveway is. So the length of the driveway, if you are brought in 3 foot from Keene's property, I believe it's actually 83 feet, and you easily fit 4 cars in that. Right now, 4 cars fit in kind of a box configuration, but either way, 4 cars, including trucks, easily fit and are able to come and go as they please. There's also an aerial map that's numbered that has other properties that have less square footage of mine that are multifamilies, 2 and 3 bedrooms, and some of them that just have extremely similar square footage as 271's property that are multifamilies. So I'm asking that the ADU can be changed into a 2-family.
So you're not proposing any new construction of any kind, right? You're just
Nothing
gonna-
at all would change.
You just want the ADU reclassified basically as a second dwelling unit on the two-family dwelling unit?
Yeah,
Okay.
it would just be paperwork that changed.
You said the driveway is 83 feet long?
83 feet. The property is 86 feet on that side, but coming in 3 feet from Keaton's city property, it would bring it to 83 feet.
Okay. Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, Mr. Hagan, do we have any information on the permit when it became an ADU?
I do. So it came due, and I can go back on the history, I brought the file down. It was,
What I'm looking for is I'm trying to sort of figure out when, if it was originally a 2-family, did it revert to a 1-family and then somebody wanted an ADU, or was it just 2-family to ADU?
so in our records, confirmed, since 1979, it's been used as a single family. It's been confirmed in all of the records that it was used as a single family since 79 until there was a building without a permit. And that occurred in,
So They
Two
were
thi-
doing construction,
they were
but they
doing
didn't get a permit.
correct, yeah. So in 2010, there was a stop work order given to the property, and because they were looking to convert it into a 2-family. Well, our records indicated it was only a single family. So the only route that they could go was the ADU without going for a variance. They chose not to go for a variance because an ADU is permitted by right under the ordinance. At the time, the ADU limitations were, there were a lot more limitations to it. So it could be no more than 30% or 600 square feet in size. So there's limitations on size. It has to be owner occupied. There's nothing, it used to require that you had 2 parking spaces for an ADU as well as for the single family. The ordinance has changed now where you can have a 1,000 square foot ADU. It can be attached or detached, and you only require 1 parking space. So with it being identified as that, you're allowed those additional requirements or additional allowances of only having 1 parking space. If it does convert to a 2-family, nothing will change as far as building permits go. The only difference would be that it can be rented out, and it does not have to be owner occupied at this point. And that she'll have to, and what she's trying to identify in some of the information, she'll have to add 1 more parking space. So identify that beyond the front setback. So that's where she provided us with a parking plan showing where she can fit 4 cars that meet the parking requirements.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yes, yes.
So, Ms. Francesco, I noticed from the picture here, and when I looked it up on.
Can I just have, can we ask them to, like,
Thank you.
take it outside or whatever?
On Google, I noticed there are 2 distinct entrances on the front of the house.
Right.
So they were there when you purchased it?
There's 2, yes, they were. There is 2 distinct entrances on the front, and there is another distinct entrance with a porch on the side where the driveways are. So each unit has its own front door and back door.
Okay, so one of the units just, has a stairway to go upstairs?
So if you go on the side, there's 3 entrances and exits. So if you pull in the driveway, on the side that you can't see, it's a door that opens into a hallway area. So you can go straight up the stairs, which leads into the top floor apartment, or you can take a left, which leads into the bottom floor apartment. And then you can also access either of the apartments with the left-hand doorway. And then the doorway on the front, on the right-hand side, is just for the first floor unit.
Okay, thank you. Gives me a little better understanding of
Yeah.
what I'm looking at.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, if I may correct
Yes.
the record, it was not 2010, it was actually 2017 for the record.
What was 2017?
The permit to create the ADU.
Okay.
So can I say something else still?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so when I purchased it, it was advertised online and through my realtor as a 2-family. And I thought it had been. I didn't have all the paperwork. I was a first-time home buyer and I did it completely on my own, but I've learned a lot since then. And again, like, the main issue is that it's my responsibility now for these 2 families because I rented to them not knowing that their housing would be in danger when I left, knowing that I would eventually be leaving. I don't have the financial means to help rehouse them.
Yes.
Another question for Mr. Hagan. As far as the square footage on the lot, is there a difference between the ADU requirement under the current zoning and a 2-family?
So there is no zone dimensional requirements for an ADU. It's by right. For any single-family home in the state of New Hampshire, you're allowed with additional conditions set forth by the municipality. But yeah, there's no additional restrictions on if the zoning allows for a single-family home on that lot, you're allowed to have an ADU on that lot.
But does the Keene zoning ordinance require square footage of the lot or not?
It does not for an ADU. As long as it meets the minimum, as long as there is a single family on the lot, you're allowed to have an ADU with no additional lot size requirements.
So what we have here is an issue of semantics.
If you, it's allowed by right, and it meets all the current zoning ordinance. What she's asking for is the variance for, if it was to be a two-family, it would be required to have 13,400 square feet. So we're
Right.
talking about 2,000 square feet if it was to be a two-family. So,
I'm going to follow up with a question for you. If we can approve, can we approve this with the condition that no further increases in the square footage of either building occur? That's legitimate, isn't it? In other words, the main house can't put an addition on anything.
you can put a condition on anything you want. My suggestion is that even if it was to be a two-family, the ordinance is intended to be able to expand out to the minimum dimensional requirements, right? You have to meet all of the setback requirements, you have to meet all of the parking requirements, you have to meet all of the height restrictions. So again, it's a pretty small house in comparison to the lot size. Again, that dimension.
The ADU is a pretty small house in comparison to the lot size. I don't have a very good
Yeah, so
copy
the
of the map here.
total square footage of the whole house is about 1,300, almost 1,400 square feet.
When you say the whole house, you mean the ADU, not the main house?
So the primary dwelling unit is 807 square feet. The ADU is 698 square feet. 598 square feet, so it's under 600 square feet. So those are pretty small units in size.
Right.
In comparison to now, just an ADU can be up to 1,000 square feet.
Okay.
If that helps answer your question, Mr. Chair.
It helps me see the relationship of the buildings better. Ms. Francisco, who are James DeVincentis and Tia, I'm not going to be able to pronounce it, Zenbauer? Are they neighbors?
I don't know, actually.
They're the
are
current
on
owners of 187 Elm Street, an abutting property.
James and Tia?
Yeah.
They might be the couple that just bought the double lot and put the house up. What was that?
I live right across the street from you.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm just asking the applicant.
She was talking about the other abutter, and I do know them.
Oh, well, hold that thought. You intend to speak later, right?
Possibly.
All right, well, just,
I'm having trouble hearing exactly what the plan is.
okay. The plan, as I understand it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is that you have a current main house and you have an ADU. You just want to allow the main house and the ADU to be single-family residences on the same lot, basically, right? So you have-
Right. Because they are identical except for the stairway is what takes away the square footage on the top one. Or
Okay.
on the bottom floor, I'm sorry.
All right.
They have separate heating and separate utilities.
Okay.
I did have a list of, I'm sorry, I'm using my phone and I don't have the best vision, but I did have a list of Oh, I'm sorry, I did include everything. It's all here.
One of the problems, just as an example, on page 132 of 137 in our packet.
Okay.
You probably can't see it from here, but it's a map, it's a street map of the area. You can't make anything out on it, though. It might be helpful to see the lots, and it's just a bad copy. I don't know what happened. If it got submitted this way, or if there was a copier problem or something, I don't know. But there look like there are numbers on here. 1 through 6 are labeled for some reason.
Yep, so 1 through 6 are, if you go down, starting on page 133, there's examples 1 through 6, and these are abutting homes.
Oh, these refer to the data you provide here.
Yeah, these are the abutting homes that are multifamilies that have about the same or smaller square footage than what I have for a property, but are passed as 2- and 3-family homes.
So if it says multifamily, you would say it's a 2-family home at least, right?
Some are 2 and some are 3. Yeah, what I don't have here is kitty corner from my property are 2 commercial properties that have 6 and 8 units in them. Because they fell out of the 200 feet abutters line. But I mean, they're like mega apartments.
I'm going to pose this question to you, maybe you can give us some direction. What do you think about your property creates a special condition that would make enforcing the 13,400 square foot requirement burdensome?
What would make it burdensome?
Yeah, what special condition of your land would make the application of that lot size requirement, 13,400 square feet, burdensome to you? In other words, you have a small lot, you have 2 relatively small structures on the lot that people live in, but then they're all pretty much close to or similar to 5 other properties in the immediate neighborhood, right? You've got
Right.
5 here, correct?
6.
6, sorry.
Yeah.
I just saw 6. I'm just trying to identify something about your property that makes the application of the zoning restriction unfair.
Oh, I mean, I think where the house sits on the property gives ample room on all sides of it to the neighbors. It's kind of the property horseshoes around it.
Okay,
And there's actually more space than just 4 parking spaces for cars to park in, but I know that's the minimum that I have. The house itself is laid out, it has more generous features as a 2-family than a lot of designated 2-families. And especially the abutting property next to me it's a 3-family, and it has, I think it has square footage that's not even enough for a 2-family, and that's passed. And then the directly abutting property in the back is a 2-family house that has just a driveway. I was shocked to find out that it doesn't look to me like it is not a 2-family. It looks like it has a spacious yard, and it feels like it has a spacious yard, and the house matches top and bottom, the apartments and the units.
okay.
It just doesn't appear to be anything but a 2-family. And the apartment on top, actually, I think the square footage is a little bit bigger than it should have been at the time that it was distinguished as an ADU. At that time, there were square footage, there was a cap on how big the ADU could be, and I think that the ADU is actually bigger than what that cap was anyways. So at the time, it shouldn't have qualified as the ADU.
Well,
It does now.
It did then, it doesn't matter at this point, sort of. Attorney Taylor?
I have a question for Mr. Hagan. Sorry about that. So, if you find that an ADU no longer meets the requirements, such as saying that one has to be owner occupied. What do you do? Sort of say that the permit is no longer valid?
Like in this situation, we'll work with the applicant to go through all the avenues that the ordinance allows for. And in this case, in her situation, it looked like a variance application, knowing that one, in this location, in medium density, it already allows for up to 3-family based upon lot size. In this case, it doesn't meet those lot sizes, but it would allow for it. So it is, again, when you try and legislate local, it's definitely hard to, the enforcement isn't easy, and it's a situation-by-situation process. In this case, it's an educational process. Hey, these are intended, if this was in low density, I think we would be having a different conversation because 2 families aren't allowed there either. So it's not just a dimensional requirement, it's a use. So in this case, you have, it's a different, and again, it's case by case. So an ADU is allowed anywhere a single family is allowed.
By
So-
right.
By right. So if you had this in West Keene on West Street, in the, next to the country club, you can have a single family with an ADU. It will look like a 2-family. I mean, or it can, it will be designed and meet the building code requirements as a 2-family. But if the owner no longer occupies that location, you can no longer use that ADU. You can still rent out the main house, but the ADU use has to cease.
Okay.
So you could rent out one of the units, or, either or, but you could not have a 2-family. You would have a single family with an ADU, owner occupied.
Thank you, that's very helpful. So I would suggest that maybe, I guess, are you trying to tell us that you feel that the special condition of this property is the fact that it's an ADU that maybe shouldn't be an ADU, if you're in simple?
It should be a 2-family.
Yeah, as it was originally built.
Right, it was it's 104 years old now. So it was, until the 70s, it was a 2-family.
The main house was a 2-family house until the 70s or whatever it was, right?
Right.
Okay.
Everything about it is separated, like the heating and the hot water tanks and the electricity and the entrances and exits and the parking spaces, and they have separate covered porches for each unit,
Okay.
separate garden spaces.
This is a picture of the house from the front of the,
Yes,
so the other porch is on the back?
on the right side.
Okay,
The
yeah.
other porch is on the right side.
The angle of this picture wouldn't allow me to see that, so, but I can picture it in my head.
It's enough, it's not as large, but it's a covered porch
Yep.
that was remodeled just like this one was when I bought it, and a little table and 2 little chairs can sit on it.
Okay.
It was very expensive during COVID to have those built.
All right. Is there anything further you want to add at the moment? You can get a chance to say something because I'm going to let public comment carry now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just, I'm excited about what Keene's doing with the cottage court project, and I just think it would be a total disservice to Keene to not have 2 2-bedroom apartments available. They're completely new. As of 2017 to 2020, it was completely gutted and remodeled. And it's a nice neighborhood now. Just, in the last 3 to 4 years, everything has been remodeled around it. It's people who care about their homes. The tenants care about their homes. I'm only going to be 11 minutes away. And to take 2 separate units off the market, or even one unit off the market that's next to a school in a good area with like a good yard for kids to play in is not good at all.
Okay. So let me invite comments from the public who oppose this application. Anybody here who wants to oppose it? Is there anybody here who wants to support the application? If so, just stand up to the mic and state your name and where you live.
Hi, my name is Gary Bowtell. I live at 280 Elm Street.
Okay. Thanks for waiting
And-
all night.
Excuse me?
Thanks for waiting all night.
Oh, the previous one took a bit longer than I expected.
Me too, but that's all right. Go ahead.
But, yeah, I would approve it being officially made a two-family, especially if there's no additional curb cuts or anything proposed. And I assumed it was a two-family anyhow. There aren't any other two families that I know of right in that area of Elm Street, but around the corner on Spruce Street and behind her property on Carroll Street, there are a couple of duplexes, and the one on Spruce Street looks like a barn with about 4 apartments in it. But there's mostly single-family houses in the neighborhood. And I've met one of the tenants over there, and they're nice people that get along. I've had zero problem with any of the immediate neighbors, and if that's what she'd like to do, that's the way it appears from the outside when the different occupants go in and out. I just always assumed it was a two-family anyhow, because it does look like one from the outside.
Okay.
And that's really about all I have to say.
Well, thanks for that.
Okay.
Anybody else? Certainly.
I'm Zach Leroy, 30 Hanover Street. I'm here as a concerned citizen in the town. I support it. I'm a real estate professional in the area, and I'm really concerned if we start treating ADUs like that, she could be harmed, because then you're looking at specific property, people looking for a specific property that would inhibit others from buying it. Not too many people are going to want to buy a home, a two-family home, without the intention of it being a two-family home. Essentially, it's different, like the example you used on West Street, where you might have a nice home with an in-law apartment or a suite, which is, I'm a huge advocate for ADUs, which was a perfect example and use of it. But in this particular circumstance, it needs to be a two-family, and looked at that way for not just this owner, but the next owner and the owners after that. That's all I had to say.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? We've heard from the public, we've heard from do you want to respond to anything you just heard?
I'm very appreciative. I didn't know that people were gonna come over 271. I appreciate you guys being involved in the community.
And wait this long to say
I
something?
know.
That's great, okay.
It's turned into a really cute neighborhood.
So I guess what we'll do now is close the public hearing and begin our deliberations, and we can decide the case, and you can know what's going to happen. Oh, before I do that, Corinne did give, and thank you, Corinne, for turning the volume down out there, so we hear stuff.
Could you open the door so we get some air, if they're
One
on?
or the other.
We had, I guess, two documents from two people. The petitioner, is it Heather or Hedner? Did I mispronounce?
No, Heather Francisco.
Okay,
Yep.
they wrote the wrong name here. They called you Hedner. I hope you don't mind.
Oh, no, it's kind of
Correct
nice.
last name, though, Francisco.
Yeah.
Request a variance to reclassify a property from a singular family home with an accessory dwelling unit to a two-family property. James D. Vincentis and Tia Zenbauer are the owners of 187 Elm Street, an abutting property, and they have no concerns with the proposed variance, and they signed it and attached a copy of the ZBA notice. So
Wow, that's so
I just wanted
nice.
to put that into the record, and I guess give this back to, you should have this, right? Okay. Don't let me forget. So with that said, and that added to the record, I'll close the public hearing. Yeah, because you don't trust me. That's a good idea. All right. So we can begin our deliberations on this matter. I'm struggling to find special conditions. Yes.
Well, not to jump to the hard part, but.
No, why not?
Why not, right. After listening to everything and the explanations of ADU and two-family, I think the special condition of this property is the building itself, and it's what is requested and what has actually happened really doesn't bear any relationship to the purpose of the zoning ordinance in this instance. I mean, usually we're talking about, the lot size is huge amongst little lots or the other way around. But if you look back again, I've cited it before, the Farrar case, which was in Keene.
Yep, I'm
which-
familiar with that one.
You represented somebody.
Right.
Huge house. And that was the issue with that, and that formed the special condition. And I think what we have here is a structure that in and of itself is a special and frankly quite unusual condition, but it certainly fits in the neighborhood. It doesn't, create any particular health or safety issues. It doesn't impact the values of surrounding properties. Benefit to the applicant certainly, to my way of thinking, outweighs any harm to the general public. So that in a nutshell is
And
where
there'd
we
be,
stand.
and I'd agree with all that. There'd be no gain to the general public to deny this, and as you mentioned, the harm to her would be pretty significant, especially when you consider the impact of her moving to Gilsum and what would happen to the people who are there by virtue of the regulations. I think that's a pretty bad outcome. And there's certainly no violations of the basic zoning objectives here. Even the neighbors are looking at this saying, well, I thought it was a two-family all along. And that makes perfect sense, because that's what it looks like. So that's what it ought to be, going back to the semantic problem. It's an unusual special condition, but I can accept that. I think it's appropriately defined.
Well, may I continue?
Sorry?
If you look at the verbiage for unnecessary hardship, excuse me,
Sure.
owing to special conditions of the property to distinguish it from other properties in the area would result in unnecessary hardship because no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property. And I think that's probably about as clear as we're going to make it.
Okay. I think that's probably well stated. Does anybody want to make a motion on this application, 2024-16?
Mr. Chair, before you do,
Yes?
could we jump back up to the top and hit maybe 1 and 2 criteria, just one more time for the
yeah.
record?
I thought we covered that in the,
And then surrounding property values.
well,
Yeah.
nothing about this application would alter the essential character of the neighborhood. We heard plenty of testimony that indicates that, walking by, driving by, looking at it, it looks like a two-family lot. So, and there's nothing about the property or the structures there that would pose, or the granting of the variance that would create a threat to the public health or safety or welfare. I don't think there's any violation of the basic zoning objectives here, for the reasons Attorney Taylor mentioned, and also by virtue of the fact that there's no harm to the neighborhood. I can't imagine that there would be any, especially in light of what the applicant told us about the beautification going on in the area, and the values of property increasing there anyway, there's not going to be any diminution in property values by virtue of this variance. And again, the unnecessary hardship, I think, was explained already. So it's too late for me to try to reiterate that. And I'm going to let the record stand where it is, because it looks pretty good right now. So, having said that, does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll go for
Mr.
it.
Clough, please.
I move that we approve ZBA 2024-16. Petitioner Heather Francisco requests a variance for property located at 271 Elm Street, tax map number 536-086-000, and is in medium-density district, requesting a variance to turn a single-family home with an accessory dwelling unit into a two-family on a lot with 11,325.6 square feet, where 13,400 square feet are required per Article 3.5.2 of the zoning regulations.
Do we have a second for that? All right, seconded. We'll go through the criteria.
Just for the record, Mr. Chair, if you can state who seconded it, for the minute.
Oh, sorry about that. Mr. Guyette seconded that. Granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. All those in favor? It's unanimous. If the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. Unanimous. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. All those in favor? Again, unanimous. If the variance were granted, the values of the surrounding properties would not be diminished. Unanimous. Owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, denial of the variance would result in an unnecessary hardship because there is no fair and substantial relationship existing between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and its specific application to the property. All those in favor? That's 4-0 unanimous. On the main motion to approve 2024-16, all those in favor? It's unanimous and it passes. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. No more hives. I'm sorry about that. It's been a scary month. Thank you very much. Thanks for, I can't believe that it's 10:30. Oh my gosh. Well, that's very.
I don't know what we're gonna do in July in here.
Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you guys so much.
Mr. Chair, have you adjourned the meeting?
I just did.
Okay.
We're adjourned.